Kicking off the list at number 10, we have Abracadabra. AKA Citizen Abra, he began his magical days as a Flash villain, first appearing in comics in The Flash issue 128. He's from the future, of course, like most of these guys are, but it's a future where, sadly, magic shows aren't a thing anymore. Yeah, sorry David Blaine, gotta get a new job. He's from the 64th century, and technology has become so advanced that pulling a rabbit out of a hat just simply won't cut it anymore. I heard about the time machine powered by M-metal, he just had to get his glittery magician hands on it. It was only capable of one trip, so Abra snuck into the laboratory and shot back in time to the 20th century where magicians were still celebrities, like Chris Angel or David Blaine or David Copperfield or, you know, the other ones. He would use technology from his timeline well beyond what we're capable of and then blow our minds in these magic shows. The shows were going well at first until people got bored, then they were actually more interested in this new statue being built in town, so he figured the next logical way of getting attention was to start stealing things, starting with this fancy new statue. He kept stealing, and he kept stealing after that, and he kept using his future tech to evade capture, so when it comes to magicians, Abracadabra is very committed to the craft, in the future or the past. Number 9. Gore, the God Butcher. The God Butcher will be played by Christian Bale in the upcoming Thor Love and Thunder sequel, and yes, he is a time-traveling menace as well. He made his first appearance in Thor God of Thunder issue 2. He was born on a planet with no name, which is always a great sign. Gore lost his parents when he was very young, and he was told to pray to these gods, because they would always make things better, these glorious gods. And then after getting a wife and son, death kept looming over, and he lost both of them as well. Really tragic stuff. So now he's a little bit more than upset at these gods. He wants them to answer or to pay, one of the two. With the all-black Necrosword powers, he heads out for revenge on these gods, but in the past. He would use the Pool of Forever to travel back in time and make these attacks happen. He would use the Pool of Forever to go back in time and then attack all these gods when they were babies, right? So it took different versions of Thor from different timelines just to put a stop to Gore the God Butcher. So with this new Thor movie coming out, including Natalie Portman, Mjolnir, Lady Sif, I feel like it's going to be a cosmic headache and do some time stuff in there as well. But in Taika, we trust. It's kind of like when Rhodey suggested getting rid of Thanos when he was younger by, you know, Gore the God Butcher is basically that mentality, but 10 times worse, and with powers.
Moving on to number 8, Doom 2099. So yes, Dr. Doom is way more villain than anti-hero, but we wanted to include this version of him on this list because it's utterly terrifying. Doom of Earth 928, aka the 2099 alternate reality, is known as All-Father Doom. It's worth noting that this universe is very much a bleak, cynical one. Now, this Doom is technically not Victor, but rather a man who believed himself to be Doom, having awakened in Latveria in the year of 2099. He takes over Latveria and then gradually starts planning on how to take over the rest of the world. So it should be no surprise that he claimed the United States presidency.
And at 7, Zombie Hulk. Marvel Zombies is probably one of the most accessible alternate futures in Marvel Comics, according to multiple people. And I don't think that we need much of an explanation here as to why Zombie Hulk would be scary powerful. Hulk is already a brute with anger issues, but this story takes place in an alternate version of the Marvel Universe called Earth 2149, where all superpowered beings became infected by an extraterrestrial virus which transformed them into zombies. So the Hulk, who already had a passion for smashing, is now hungry for human flesh. Do you see where I'm going with this? On the wiki, his abilities are listed as genius level intellect, superhuman strength, superhuman speed, master combatant, and cosmic powers from when he ate the Silver Surfer and Galactus. But his hobbies also include devouring living flesh, which sounds like the worst dating profile ever, or the best. They even have a section for crimes he's committed, like genocide, cannibalism, and more. I wish they had that section on Tinder. That'd make things interesting.
Moving on to number 6, Magus. Magus is quite literally the definition of an evil future alternate version of a hero. That hero is Adam Warlock. Now, Warlock, arguably one of the most noble individuals in the 616 Marvel Universe, has an evil future version who first appeared in 1975 in Strange Tales issue 178. He hails from Earth 7528, born of Chaos and Order's efforts to create a champion of life to oppose Thanos, who was the champion of death. He would found something called the Universal Church of Truth, which the Tyrant expanded into an intergalactic empire through Holy War. Ah, Holy War.
Number 5, Uranos. Okay, technically this guy actually appeared in What If number 24 in September of 1980, but he didn't really do much and was never really mentioned until very recently. Uranos the Undying is an Eternal and one of the deadliest beings in the Marvel Universe. Uranos, like every Eternal, was created by the Celestials 1 million years ago, but he believed the Eternals best fulfilled their purpose if they exterminated both the deviants and humans, all life outside the universe, and imprisoned the Celestials. Luckily, his brothers Kronos and Oceanus disagreed, plunging the Eternals into a civil war. Ultimately, Uranos lost that war and was captured by his brothers and became the first Eternal to be imprisoned within the Exclusion, where he stayed for over 500,000 years because of the failsafe he imposed upon the machine. That failsafe being that if he dies, his greatest celestial designed weapons will be unleashed on the world. Recently, mutants have been revealed to be related to deviants, making the X-Men enemies to the Eternals, and the Eternal Druid called on Uranus for help in Axe Judgment Day number 1. And he definitely did help, as in a matter of 20 minutes, Uranos eradicated Cable, Magneto, and David Haller, otherwise known as Legion, along with a bunch of other powerful Omega level mutants. Number 4, Yuga Khan. Yuga Khan is the first ever tyrannical ruler of the planet of Apocalypse, and the father of both Drax, who would become the Infinity Man, and Uxas, who would become Darkseid. Given his nature as essentially a god and one that fathered the current gods, Yuga Khan is certainly ancient, being essentially immortal. As an example, before the fourth world is even fully formed, Yuga Khan alongside his wife, Hegra, and their sons ruled Apocalypse, creating one of the most feared empires in the entire universe. But being such an astronomically powerful being, it wasn't enough for him. Yuga Khan was obsessed with becoming the most powerful being in the universe and wanted to be able to essentially control it all. But he was also obsessed with finding out the reason for why it all exists. So he's a conqueror, sure, but he's also a philosopher, which is nice. This obsession is what brought him to the Source Wall, getting trapped in it while trying to unravel the mysteries of the Source. All the inhabitants of New Genesis are way stronger, faster, and smarter than humans, being almost all on a level akin to Superman, while also being immortal. But Yuga Khan, he is the most powerful of them all. So much so that after an absolutely colossal effort, Yuga Khan was even able to break free of the Source Wall. That act released energies that could be felt throughout the galaxy and caused the universe itself to shake. I don't even know how that works. He then replenished his power by absorbing the entire life force of the planet Velos and all its inhabitants, and then did the same thing for millions of other worlds while on his way to Apocalypse. His return to Apocalypse made everyone tremble, including its current ruler, his son Darkseid, who he imprisoned in the core of the planet. Most recently though, Yuga Khan was one of the beings empowering Shazam during Darkseid War. Number 3, Kulan Gath. Kulan Gath was a sorcerer who lived in Earth's Hyborian era, aka the time of Conan the Barbarian. So yes, he is incredibly ancient. He actually isn't the original Kulan Gath though. Well, he is, and he isn't. You see, Kulan Gath had a slave who poisoned him and assumed his identity. When this Kulan Gath sought out the training of the then Sorcerer Supreme, Mekri Ra, he was refused. He responded by taking the life of and consuming the Sorcerer Supreme, gaining his power. As an enemy of Conan the Barbarian, Kulan was eventually beheaded by the Barbarian, but not before he had become immortal by putting his essence into a magical amulet. So yes, he pulled a Voldemort and made a Horcrux. After the amulet had made its way to Manhattan in the modern era, it ended up in the hands of a mugger, who donned the amulet, allowing Kulan Gath to possess and transform the body of the mugger. Then, he transformed Manhattan into a replica of the time he came from, manipulated the minds of everyone there, and took control of the minds of the Avengers, X-Men, New Mutants, and Morlocks to hunt down Spider-Man. It took the combined powers of Doctor Strange and the mutant magic to change time so that the mugger was killed by Nimrod instead and never possessed by Gath. You know you're a problem when people just go back in time to make sure that you never get back. Number 2, the Great Darkness. So great. You can't get much more ancient than existing before creation. The Great Darkness was the literal darkness and nothingness that existed before the Presence ever came to be. When the Presence, aka God, said, "Let there be light," the Great Darkness is the one who went into hiding. At some point, a clan known as the Brujeria, which is, I think I said that right, attempted a ritual to reawaken the Great Darkness in order to destroy God and reshape the universe. Instead of being completely evil though, it was more like an animal who was confused and didn't understand its power or what its purpose even was. The Great Darkness, also sometimes referred to as the Great Evil Beast, went on a warpath, easily defeating many heroes and waging a solo assault on heaven itself, decimating everything in its way to demand answers from the Presence. It even caused the three main figures of hell to form a union with each other just in case it decided to attack them, which it didn't. When the Great Darkness reached heaven though, it met Swamp Thing, of all people, who taught it the concept of good and evil, explaining that one couldn't survive without the other. The darkness then reached up and God reached back and they became one and the same as yin and yang, or as a balance, that kind of thing. Recently though, the Great Darkness played a large role in the Dark Crisis event. It's basically the overarching villain of the entire DC multiverse, but also it's kind of just a force of nature. Sort of. Number 1, the Black Winter. You know, Galactus almost made this list, but why choose him when you can choose the bigger, more dangerous, and surprisingly not well-known Pappy of Galactus? Where Galactus consumes individual planets, the Black Winter devours entire realities. The Black Winter, also known as the Star Plague, the Blight Storm, the Rot Blizzard, or the Thimble Winter, was the one who brought the end to the 6th iteration of the cosmos, leaving only Galen of the planet Ta, the one who becomes Galactus, alive. The Black Winter essentially made Galen his herald, so when the Black Winter arrives in the Marvel Universe in the latest run of Thor, Galactus turns an All-Father Thor who possessed the Thor Force into his Herald of Thunder, granting him the power cosmic, and an attack from this Thor only stops the Black Winter for a total of 14 seconds. That's nuts! That's how powerful this multiversal entity is. But luckily, at this time, the Black Winter isn't here to destroy the universe. He's just here for his herald, Galactus. But still, Thor turns Galactus into a massive power cosmic explosion that destroys the Black Winter completely, and it's incredibly awesome.
Number 10. Chameleon. Chameleon made his first appearance in the very first issue of The Amazing Spider-Man. Although there are a lot of other famous supervillains that people think of when it comes to Peter Parker's gallery of famous and capable rogues, Chameleon was the first that Spider-Man would come up against. In this very first issue, Spider-Man attempted to join the Fantastic Four, who basically fight him due to the fact that they think he's some kind of villain for breaking into the Baxter Building. Of course, Spider-Man was only attempting to do so to impress them so they would invite him to join their team. When they refused to accept him into the team, Spider-Man set on his own to fight crime, and Chameleon disguised himself as Spider-Man to protect his own identity while committing crimes himself, ruining Spidey's reputation and ensuing Peter to go up against Chameleon to put a stop to him. Number 9. Dr. Von Doom and his Doombots. Sounds like a cool band. Dr. Von Doom and his Doombots. We were first introduced to Dr. Doom as a supervillain in issue 5 of the first volume of the Fantastic Four. In his introductory issue, the famous and brilliant villain used his brains and gadgets to capture the Fantastic Four. He wanted them to help him capture Blackbeard's treasure by using a time travel machine that he had constructed to send them into the past. In the end, they tricked him with a chest full of chains, and the thing smashed Dr. Doom to bits, only to find out that the Doom that they were dealing with was actually a robotic copy. The actual Doom also ended up getting defeated as well, and the Fantastic Four got away. But this certainly wouldn't be the last that they would see of Doom, who would become their most iconic foe. Number 8. Miracle Man. What's up with all these original Fantastic Four rogues who kidnapped Invisible Woman, by the way, or Invisible Girl as she was known then? Apparently, kidnapping Sue was a classic villain move back in the day. Miracle Man was originally a stage magician who claimed that he was even more powerful than the Fantastic Four, who just so happened to be in his audience when he was performing. After that he proved this in his stage show, he decided that he should probably become a criminal. He was so talented and smart and obviously, I guess, selfish and villainous somewhat, if he decided to go that route as opposed to the heroic one, that he made the Fantastic Four think that a promotional statue for a film called The Monster of Mars had come to life. While the Fantastic Four were distracted dealing with that whole scenario, he pulled off a series of robberies. But don't worry, he was defeated. After, of course, he kidnapped the Invisible Girl. Like I said, That's a thing that people like to do back in the day. Number 7. Skrulls. That's right, Skrulls are some of the oldest villains around. Did you know that? I know, it's pretty surprising. Although they aren't exactly considered clean-cut villains anymore. They have even teamed up with Earth's mightiest heroes, the Avengers, before to help save the universe. Originally, however, the Skrulls appeared in Fantastic Four Volume 1, Issue 2, and were hell-bent on invading Earth. This was right after the FF team had been introduced, which was basically all that issue 1 was about, an origin story. The Skrulls knew that the FF were the main protectors of Earth, despite the fact that they'd sort of just started their superhero career, which is kind of weird. Anyways, they decided to impersonate the FF, commit a bunch of villainous deeds while impersonating them in order to frame them and have Earth's military capture and kill the Fantastic Four team, so that the Skrulls might then invade Earth with no one powerful enough to put a stop to them. Of course, this plan was foiled when the FF trapped the imposters, unmasked them as Skrulls, and ended up posing as those Skrulls to tell the Skrull leader that Earth's defenses were too powerful for the invasion to succeed, thus scaring them off. Basically, they defeated an entire Skrull invasion in that comic, so that's pretty impressive. The Skrulls that originally posed as the Fantastic Four members were forced to stay behind after the invasion left, because obviously the Fantastic Four was not going to let them go back up onto that ship. So they then decided to take the form of cows and continue to live on Earth in apparent peace. Peaceful cows. Apparently they'd rather be anything but Skrulls, so they said in the comic, which I thought, oh, that's kind of like rude. I'm sure there are Skrulls that really like being Skrulls. Ugh. Number 6. Dr. Sivana. If you've seen the film Shazam, you likely are familiar with Dr. Sivana, or if you're aware of the Captain Marvel / Shazam comics. He was one of the first villains that Shazam actually came up against and made his comic book debut in Whiz Comics issue number 2. His first master plot of villainy? To ransom radio waves. The 1940s, what a time. He asked for $50 million, and if he wasn't paid, threatened to create radio silence everywhere. Because this was the 40s, of course, that was a really big deal. Although right now we'd probably be like, who listens to the radio? But also $50 million is an insane amount of money to ask for. I feel like if Dr. Sivana hadn't been so greedy, it might have worked out better for him. Because $50 million in the 1940s? Jeez! In the end, Billy Batson and his Captain Marvel form defeated Sivana by smashing his radio silencer tech, which was like this huge machine by the way, to smithereens. But as promised, the Doctor would return to battle Captain Marvel, or as he's known now, Shazam, again, becoming one of his mainstay villains. Number 5. Morlun and the Inheritors. Morlun and the Inheritors sounds like the name of a band. A band of vampires? Not a thing. A coven of vampires, really, I guess I should say. And no, I don't believe they play musical instruments and or perform in any kind of musical acts, sadly. Morlun and the Inheritors are a threat that we meet as we go into the Spider-Verse. They were the main antagonists of the Spider-Verse event in the comics, which promised to feature all the alternate Spider-Men, women, and folks that had ever featured. And they were also the main antagonists of the follow-up event, Spider-Geddon. The Inheritors are basically energy vampires that feed specifically on what is known as totemic life energy. What is that? What is a totem? It is usually a superpowered or somewhat unique individual who represents some kind of powerful animal instinct or arachnid avatar, like spiders! Morlun specifically is well known for being a main villain of Spider-Man's, and while he's not as prominently featured as, some of other Spidey's villains, he is still particularly powerful. We don't really know, I don't think, how old the Inheritors or Morlun are, at least not in their first life, but we do know they're pretty old, having participated in fights in the multiverse seemingly a long time ago. Also, they'd like to dress up super Victorian, so they gotta at least be from that era or beyond, although they're not necessarily Earth-based villains, they're multiversal villains. Number 4. Sin. Sin might be one that people are a little bit more familiar with in another form, but also there might be a lot of you out there who aren't, as this villain hails from the Spawn comics. If you are up to date with your Spawn reading, then you know who I'm talking about here, but for those of you who aren't up to date, or who maybe have never read Spawn, this villain was actually formerly known as a longtime ally of Al Simmons' Spawn, his mentor in a way, Cogliostro. While initially just seeming like a well-meaning fellow Hellspawn, seeking to teach Al the ropes and also help to guide him away from being fully used as a pawn of hell, Cogliostro is actually later revealed to be more ancient than we might have otherwise thought, in fact also being known by another name even before he was known as Cog. Cain. Yeah, the Cain, the man from biblical myth who killed his brother and was condemned for it, Cain of Cain and Abel. After revealing that he was really only helping Spawn to serve his own interests and becoming a villain, Cog was redeemed once more for a short little while before becoming a villain again, who has the ability to drain the power of other hellspawns, being known now as Sin. Sin with two N's. Number 3. Ramatut. While we all know Kang the Conqueror now, thanks to him being featured in the MCU in Quantumania, and the hype for his inclusion in that film being very, very real, I would say at this point, not everyone is as familiar with the other versions of Nathaniel Richards from Earth 6311. Despite the fact that this is a villain from the future, Kang actually has existed across time in many different forms, adopting the form even of an ancient pharaoh. This was back when Kang was a ruler in ancient Egypt, before he was really even Kang. Nathaniel Richards became obsessed with the reality of Earth 616 and would eventually construct a time machine shaped like a sphinx and use it to travel back in time to around 2960 BC. Having brought with him a robotic army and advanced futuristic weapons, it wasn't long before Nathaniel was the ruler of Egypt, taking the name of Ramatut. This version of Nathaniel also became focused and obsessed on the creation of En-Saba-Nur, who, as Ramatut knew, was destined to become the world's first mutant. Number 2. Perpetua. Perpetua is one of those characters who is super powerful and who tons of people should know about, really, just for that reason alone, I would say. But no. Instead, most folks know more about the Anti-Monitor, Perpetua's son, than they do about her. Granted, this could be because she's simply a newer character, and in that case, I mean, fair enough. She's a newer character, but she's also really old because she's kind of like a retcon character. Perpetua is known for being the first one to create the multiverse, or at least, one of the first people, depending on how you like to reconcile DC lore, because I feel like Perpetua isn't the first one that we've said that about. While Anti-Monitor is the character most well known for causing the Crisis on Infinite Earths, it's later revealed that Perpetua was the one truly pulling his strings, and therefore responsible for this crisis. In fact, Perpetua feeds off Crisis energy, and is said to have been responsible for all crises we've seen. At least all crises we've seen before Dark Crisis, likely, since I think she was dead when that one actually took place, so, or at least defeated. Is she still alive? I don't think so. Number 1. Rotath of Lemuria. Heading back to the Hyborian Age once again on one of our ancient lists, which, by the way, if you want to visit the Hyborian Age again and again, you should check out part 1 and part 2 of our ancient superheroes list. We got you. Rotath of Lemuria is a common example of how magic was presented often in stories from the Hyborian Age, especially in regards to Conan's story there. Rotath made his first appearance in issue number 37 of Conan the Barbarian from the 70s, when everyone was into the sword and sorcery genre. In this same issue, Rotath was killed by Kull after he was hired by the king of Lemuria, who was frightened of Rotath's power. As he died though, Rotath cursed both the king and Kull, casting a spell so that he might return. And so he did, this time in a golden body, but still he ended up being defeated, this time not by Kull directly, but instead, of course, after fighting Conan and Juma, and also being defeated by a giant slug, which that part is a little random, but hey, I'll take it.
Number 10. Mistress Death. To call this character evil is a bit of a miscommunication. She is just a law of the universe, a force of nature, a cosmic being carrying out her duty. But to many people, she is an evil entity because, losing a loved one is one of the most emotionally painful things we can go through. No matter if you see her as evil or just doing her job, she has been around since the creation of the universe, so there is no doubt that she is ancient. So I'm keeping her here at the top of the list because she isn't entirely evil and has comforted and even saved a few people on a few occasions, but still brings the end of the line. She keeps balance in the universe, taking away life while other cosmic entities give it. Also, she's a big part of the reason Thanos has done all the horrible things he's done in Marvel Comics, so there's that as well to make her seem a bit more evil.
Coming up on the 9th spot is No. That's with a K. And this fella is bad news. He's an eldritch entity, the god of darkness, ruler of the void, and oh yeah, homeboy created the symbiotes. Any evil that's come from the many symbiotes can all be traced back to No, who rules over the hive mind. When you stop and consider just how much suffering the symbiotes have been responsible for, how much damage and destruction, and all of that can be pointed back to Null, you gotta figure that is a pretty powerful ancient evil. Decked out with some sweet symbiote armor and an impressive sword, Null has his sights set on galactic conquest with his symbiote army. And honestly, he was making a pretty good play for the throne were he not stopped by Eddie Brock in a truly staggering duel of cosmic proportions. Sure, yeah, you might have birthed the symbiote race, but it's hard for anyone to top the guy who made symbiotes cool in the first place. You can't beat Venom. I mean, he's got his own theme song by Eminem. How many of us can say the same?
Number 8, Selene. While a lot of beings on this list are cosmic and godlike in their nature, Selene is a mutant external and a magician born 17,000 years ago. She gained the ability to psionically drain the life forces of other human beings into herself, gaining their memories, and if she fully drains them, turning that individual into dust. Yikes. Essentially, she is a vampire, just without any of the blood draining stuff. Using this drained energy, she not only sustains herself, but can grant herself superhuman levels of physical strength, speed, stamina, agility, reflexes, and durability. But that's not her only powers. As an external, she also possesses immortality, allowing her to even resurrect herself. Since she has been around for so long, she is quite the adept sorcerer and can do a hell of a lot with that power. She has demonstrated telepathy, telekinesis, pyrokinesis, and the knack for being just pretty sinister.
Number 7, Shuma Gorath. Now maybe you remember Shuma Gorath from a star-studded appearance in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Except psych! Due to a licensing issue, that was actually Gargantos. But it was supposed to be Shuma Gorath, so you were right to think that. Marvel's resident Lovecraftian god, who's lived for millions of years beyond the stars. Even older than the Marvel Universe itself. Quite literally, if you want to get a bit metatextual with it, since Shuma Gorath began life as a villain for the Conan mythos, tying itself into the greater Cthulhu mythos with H.P. Lovecraft, who was a pretty good friend of Robert E. Howard back in the day. It's a pretty interesting backstory and makes sense since Shuma Gorath is an all-powerful multi-dimensional entity. It only makes sense that it exists across the multiverse in ours as well. Shuma Gorath is about as powerful as a Lovecraftian god can get, boasting all the usual feats: incredible strength, difficult to put down, all kinds of psychokinetic abilities that leads him into all sorts of clashes with everybody's favorite sorcerer, Doctor Strange.
Number 6, the Black Winter. You know, Galactus almost made this list, but why choose him when you can choose a bigger version of him? Where Galactus consumes individual planets, the Black Winter devours entire realities. The Black Winter, the Star Plague, the Blight Storm, the Rot Blizzard, or the Fimbulwinter, for the Norse mythology people out there, was the one who brought the end of the 6th iteration of the universe, leaving only Galen of the planet Ta, and that's the guy who becomes Galactus. When the Black Winter arrives in the Marvel Universe in the latest run of Thor, Galactus turns an All-Father Thor, who possesses the Thor Force, into his Herald of Thunder, and it's awesome, granting him the power cosmic, and an attack from this Thor only stops the Black Winter for a total of 14 seconds. That's how powerful this multiversal entity is. Luckily though, at this time, the Black Winter isn't here to destroy the universe, he is just here for his herald, Galactus. Luckily, Thor turns Galactus into a massive power cosmic explosion that destroys the Black Winter. It's all just super awesome. Definitely check it out.
At number 5, we have Necron. You ever hear of the philosophical darkness that preceded the light? Well, his name is Necron, and he's the leader of the Black Lantern Corps and the Lord of the Unliving. And that wasn't even a monetization-friendly self-censor either. That's the actual title of the land that he rules over, where the souls of the unalive await passage to their final residence, like a sort of purgatory. And it's from these unliving souls that Necron draws his power. He first became a threat to Earth after becoming aware of our reality's existence when an interdimensional rift is accidentally opened between the two dimensions after a paradox occurs in which an immortal being was banished to the realm of the dead. The unalive, YouTube. Anyhow, desiring the world that he was now able to see but being too large to pass through the rift, Necron imbues that aforementioned immortal with enormous power and sends him to go terminate the Guardians of the Universe in an attempt to increase the size of the rift. And that immortal, whose name I don't want to give away because he may or may not be the top spot on this list, does his part and sends several Guardians and Green Lanterns to go see Necron, if you catch my drift. That is until Hal Jordan managed to enter Necron's realm, inciting the spirits of the recently defeated Lanterns to rebel against Necron, distracting him long enough for the Lanterns on the other side to seal up the rift, albeit with Hal trapped inside. Poor guy.
Number 4, Nimrod. In an alternate future known as Days of Future Past, Sentinels rule over North America. The original Nimrod was built as an advanced prototype. He's a mutant hunting robot, built from technology derived from the original Sentinels. He follows Rachel Summers into the past and causes no end of trouble for the X-Men. Eventually, Nimrod is absorbed by the gigantic core Sentinel known as Master Mold, and the two travel together through a dimensional gateway that erases the identity of those who travel through it. So the two merge into a being called Bastion, a fully evolved Sentinel who has been destroyed and rebuilt using Nimrod's previous body several times. It's super weird and complicated like time travel stuff usually is, but personally I just can't get over the fact that his name is Nimrod.
Speaking of mutant hunting robots, up next number 3 is Nimrod. Nimrod is from the Days of Future Past timeline, derived from the technology of Sentinels. He is a doozy. This robot is pretty much indestructible, can shapeshift and teleport, interface with computers, project energy, and of course has superhuman strength, durability, and regeneration, the whole king caboodle. Created by Chris Claremont and John Romita Jr. in 1985, he would find his way into the present after following Rachel Summers, who was traveling backwards in time to present day. He's the most advanced form of a Sentinel, and can disguise himself to look human. He is capable of reconstructing himself to make improvements, constantly adapting and becoming more and more of a threat. And hey, he's strong enough to engage Juggernaut in hand-to-hand combat, so that is a lot.
Number 2, Professor Zoom. Arch nemesis to Barry Allen, the Flash, Professor Zoom is a time traveler who wants nothing more than to destroy everything the Flash has ever stood for. He is remarkably powerful with a brilliant mind and super speed. He's been affiliated with various groups including the Secret Society of Supervillains. He is super nefarious, having gone back in time multiple times to get what he wants, even once preventing his own brother from being born. He was once in love with a reporter, but her eventual rejection left him so scorned that his future self went back in time and traumatized the reporter as a child, rendering her mute and causing her to be institutionalized. There are honestly many more examples of this guy's heartlessly evil ways, but I think you get the idea. This is one super evil time traveling jerk, and a perfect fit for the number 2 spot on this list.
And finally, number 1, Kang the Conqueror. Nathaniel Richards, making his first appearance in Avengers issue 8 back in 1964, so old. Kang has seen many centuries. His powers allow him, of course, to travel through time, and his futuristic suit of armor is built with all these badass weapons to help him do so. That plus, of course, he's a super genius, which means it's a pretty stacked combo. Kind of OP if you ask me. He was born in the 30th century of Earth 6311, which is a world where the Dark Ages never happened. Yeah, the time travel stuff doesn't come without consequence though, because as Kang travels more and more through time, he creates time-displaced duplicates, which are just so easy to keep track of. So we love those. Kang is on the way in the MCU as well, and he's being played by Jonathan Majors. And with the whole time variance authority stuff coming into play with the Loki show, things are gonna get so confusing. He actually once ruled over Egypt, believe it or not, as their new pharaoh, named himself Rama-Tut as well. He was actually there looking for another time-traveling baddie, and Sabanur, aka Apocalypse. Yeah, he wanted to make Apocalypse his hair, which is just a great thing to do, for sure. Spooky stuff. You don't want to mess around with this guy.
Number 10, Savior. Savior is a future version of Tim Drake who becomes Batman. Doesn't sound so villainous, right? Well, this future Bat version of Timothy Drake takes things a little too far, which is what makes him more villainous than heroic, despite taking up his own version of the cape and the cowl. Drake in the Titans Tomorrow reality is known by the vigilante codename of Savior, and has gone to extremes to do what he believes is right, meaning that Drake doesn't hold back and kills villains or even heroes who get in his way, eliminating them permanently. Drake and the world were seemingly transformed by a crisis event. In addition, Batman was also killed by Batwoman, which heavily shaped the life of Tim Drake in this reality, who would then do what he swore he would never do and continue on the Batman legacy in Bruce's place. Number 9, King Thanos. King Thanos is an alternate version of Thanos who hails from a pretty terrible future where he has successfully destroyed almost all life in the universe in an attempt to win the favor of Lady Death. In this universe, Frank Castle also becomes Ghost Rider after being killed and then making a deal to become Ghost Rider, returning to Earth in an attempt to avenge the fallen heroes of Earth, only to return too late, with Earth pretty much being decimated by Thanos already. As Ghost Rider, Castle lost his mind from loneliness, but would later have no other choice left but to become the Herald of King Thanos. King Thanos actually has a few people left to kill and needs help, so he actually sends Cosmic Ghost Rider, aka Frank Castle, back in time for a younger version of himself to basically help him in his final battle.
Number 8, Timothy Drake. The Red Robin, aka Tim Drake, first entered comics in Batman 436. He was a young boy who saw the Flying Graysons show live in person. He even received kind words from Dick Grayson, and Dick dedicated that act to Tim that night. How lovely. Now, of course, this was moments before Dick's parents, John and Mary, tragically died during this act. A night Tim would never forget, especially when he witnessed the Caped Crusader himself, Batman, consoling Dick Grayson afterwards. So years later, when Tim was 9, it was Batman and Robin taking down the Penguin, and Robin did this quadruple somersault, the only flip that could be performed by a Grayson, and then he connected the dots. He's like, oh, so you're him and you're him. Got it. Tim followed them around for a while, and then after Jason's death, Tim suited up himself as the third Robin. But in the Titans Tomorrow storyline, we see the Teen Titans travel to the 31st century to assist the Legion of Superheroes, and when they return, they accidentally end up 10 years in their future. So they meet older, darker future versions of themselves, including Timothy Drake, now going by Savior. This version of Tim is ruthless. He even carries around with him Joe Chill's gun to help get the job done. So when the team gets back to their real timeline, they swear to never become their dark counterparts, and they split up. But, like I said earlier, this split up is actually what ends up causing the dark versions of themselves to happen in the first place. Time! You can't mess with time. That's it. The Titans Tomorrow storyline is definitely one you need to check out. We love dark, evil versions of our heroes. We can't get enough of them.
And number 7, Deadpool. Yes, Wade Wilson kills the Marvel Universe, and it is gloriously glory and gory. Deadpool of Earth 12101, that is. So this issue was released August 2012, and I mean, just the front cover, you know you want to take a peek in. So what's the story here? Well, the X-Men put Wade into the Ravencroft Asylum in attempts to, heal his insanity, but of course the Doctor wasn't too good at handling such a task from such a man. The Doctor being Psycho Man, of course. So yeah, he brainwashed Wade in hopes to shut down all of his inner voices, and it worked. But the only downside, those voices were now replaced with other voices, and these ones were encouraging him to, well, of course, kill everybody in the Marvel Universe. Love it. It's like when you get a song stuck in your head, but it's like, kill everyone in the Marvel. You know how that goes. So right off the bat, the series pulls you in, right? It opens up with the Fantastic Four facing off with Wade. And he kind of kills them all. Like Reed Richards' face is all rubbery, it's like melting. Sue has to watch Deadpool kill Johnny before meeting her own demise. And that's just the first few pages alone. Then the Watcher ends up taking us back to the beginning and how it all started with Dr. Psycho and all that jazz. So it's fun, you get a little peek at what happens and then you wrap it back in time. Kind of like a little Tarantino flick. And it's honestly a really fun run. It's not for the faint of heart, but definitely fun.
Number 6, Reverse Flash. Eobard Thawne made his debut in Flash issue 139, titled The Black Flash. He was the OG Reverse Flash. He was born in 2451 when his parents genetically engineered him, because that's the thing you do in the future, and you can engineer your kids to look and be funny and cute, I guess. Okay, cool. But he lacked the social skills in this time to make his parents truly proud, so they decided, you know what, another son may be the key. A new best friend, great idea, they can pair up and talk and be friends and stuff. Okay, cool. I grew up with siblings, I get it. That second son's name was Robert. He spent so much time trying to keep an eye on Robert and to make his parents proud and to babysit him, that down the road his application to study the Speed Force at the Flash Museum was rejected. He was too busy, couldn't even study. So he studied it illegally. But he was caught by his brother, who is now an officer in the Science Police. This guy is interesting and a little confusing. So a future version of Eobard traveled through time and prevented his brother from being born, and then he was able to study and was in turn this time around admitted to the Flash Museum. Great. But then when Professor Drake was on the verge of proving the existence of the Speed Force, Eobard has trained his whole life for this, so he wanted to collab, but Drake said no. He wanted to do it solo. So he traveled back in time again and eliminated Professor Drake from the equation. So next time around, there's no Drake, there's no problem. Now Eobard is the professor at the Flash Museum and was nicknamed Professor Zoom. Reverse Flash is responsible for the death of Barry Allen's mother and his wife Iris West. He just rips timelines and the Flash's life to pieces. That's his whole thing.
Up next at 5, Maestro. Maestro is a terrifying future version of the Hulk who first appeared in the Incredible Hulk Future Imperfect issue 1 in 1992. He is the product of a nuclear war that pretty much wiped out most of Earth's superhumans, leaving the rest of the globe on the brink of extinction. But Maestro doesn't need to worry about dying. He survived the blast and the radiation, although he has the latter to thank for becoming insane. His bitterness towards the rest of the world has been amplified, and he rules over this future world having collected relics of previous superpowered individuals as if they were trophies. All in all, he's evil as hell, and is exactly the nightmarish version of the Hulk that many in the Marvel Universe hope will never see the light of day in the main continuity, even though he technically did appear in the main continuity. But like, you know, as a bigger threat to like the entire universe, not just Bruce Banner.
Number 4, Time Trapper. First appearing in Adventure Comics 317, Time Trapper was introduced to readers as a warlord in the far future who prevents the Legion of Superheroes from traveling into their future with this iron curtain of time. The Time Trapper's main goal basically was to steal this weapon that could absorb every energy in the universe, just this Dyson vacuum full of energy called the Concentrator. Now the team caught wind of this Time Trapper when they could no longer jump more than 30 days in the future. They're like, okay, something's up, there's some higher powers preventing us from being badass. He resides comfortably at the end of time, accompanied by his servants, the Glorith of Baldur. Time Trapper can age anybody he wants, either a couple years or straight to the ashes and bones part. In Action Comics 385, Time Trapper created a temporal force barrier in order to seal a time-traveling Superman away from the 20th century. He's that powerful.
Number 3, Gore. So it was recently announced that the God Butcher himself will be played by Christian Bale in the upcoming Thor Love and Thunder movie. So I figured this would be a good time to play catch up and see what to expect. Gore made his first appearance in Thor God of Thunder issue 2. Born on a planet with no name, always a great sign, Gore lost his parents at a very young age and was told to pray to the gods, because they would always make things better, you know how gods be. And then after getting a wife and son, death kept looming over, and he lost both of them as well. So now he's a little upset at said gods, and he wants them to pay. And with the all-black Necro Sword powers, he headed out for revenge. Now, this sword is a pretty big deal. It was actually built by Null, the almighty symbiote god, and he took out a lot of gods with it, all but of course, Thor. We got Gore Thor and Thor 4. So he uses the Pool of Forever to make his time travel attacks on the gods and stay ahead of the game. He also used it to travel back in time before the universe to kill a baby elder god, little baby boy elder god, and then steal its heart. Sick. Then he used it to go ahead in time to the future to Earth 14412, and I hope the MCU doesn't do too much time travel here because my head already hurts with these new timelines coming in. Can't even keep track. What's going on?
Number 2, Chronos. If you do the crime, you're doing the time. But if you have enough time, you can plan said crime out in detail, and then maybe you just won't get caught next time. David Clinton first entered DC Comics with the Atom issue 3. He's mainly a villain for Ray Palmer, aka the Atom. Now he was a criminal his entire life, and finally when he was arrested, he was thrown in the slammer, where he had time to think about everything that he's done, all the reasons why he got caught, why his plans didn't work. But maybe he had a bit too much time. He reflected on his past crimes and what he would have done differently if he had planned it better, and then he used his skills and obsessions with timepieces to work non-stop in the prison workshop, where he learned about clocks, time, the mechanisms within. He learned about everything. So when his sentence was finally up, he was released and then became a time-traveling villain. He used all these time-inspired weapons, like an exploding hourglass, a wristwatch with blades instead of hands, and a device that could slow time down. Going by the new name Chronos, in the DC animated universe, Chronos used these devices to go back in time and steal rare relics from the past. At one point, he actually tried stealing a utility belt from the Justice League's Watchtower, but when he was interrupted, he made a break for it through the time vortex, and Green Lantern, Batman, and Wonder Woman followed him back. Not this time, Chronos. Literally, not this time. Maybe the next one. And finally, number 1, Kang. Kang the Conqueror. As Loki gets closer to wrapping up, we're starting to see some higher powers at play here. The Time Lords were just androids. Loki was banished to a realm full of other Lokis. We're not really sure who's calling the shots yet, but signs are pointing to Kang. Jonathan Majors is already set to play the time-traveling villain in the next Ant-Man film, so let's do a quick refresh on him. Kang the Conqueror, aka Nathaniel Richards, made his first appearance in Avengers issue 8 back in 1964. Kang has seen many centuries. He can travel through time, and his futuristic suit of armor is built with weapons that can take on any superhero from any timeline that he chooses. He's super powerful, and it sure helps when he travels with armies. That often does a trick. So he discovered time travel tech from the 31st century developed by Dr. Doom, and being a descendant of Reed Richards with that brain power, he figured out a way to make it work to his advantage. He traveled back in time initially to become Pharaoh Rama-Tut, but once he returned to his 31st century, it was now just a wasteland. So he figured, okay, now I'm going to go all the way back and just rule Earth to prevent said destruction from happening. I feel like Kang is one episode away. We're so close. I can feel it in my soul.
Number 10, Cable. Cable is not only dangerous to others he comes up against as a hero, but he's even dangerous to himself. Cable is a badass from the future who is taken there in his youth to protect him and ensure his survival. He has since made his way all across and through time, and has even returned to the present from the future, which is his past. Yeah, it's a lot of time travel stuff. It can get a little confusing. When Cable dies, it isn't even because anyone else took him out either, and he even saw it coming, because it turns out that his younger self was the one responsible, a version of the character we often refer to as young Cable or Kid Cable. So yeah, Cable is deadly in the sense that he'll do whatever he needs to, even if it means ending his own time loop by killing his older self. Does that make sense? I hope what I said just made sense. I think it made sense. Number 9, Old Woman Laura. X-23's future self ends up in a much nicer alternate future reality than her genetic father Wolverine. Old Man Logan's reality? Wasteland, lots of death and people who have gone insane, cannibalism. Old Woman Laura's reality? A sort of futuristic paradise where Kamala Khan ends up as president. But even still, her future isn't perfect, because Laura is dying. Her genes have become unstable in her old age due to a flaw in the cloning process that made her not so good. The other thing that's not so good, Doom is holding the people of Latveria hostage, and it's up to Laura to put a stop to it. This version of Laura from the future is just as deadly as her main continuity counterpart, but with added years of experience, and is willing to do whatever it takes to defeat Doom, even if it means killing him and possibly sacrificing herself to do it. Number 8, Kronos. Kronos is a somewhat confusing character in DC continuity because there are multiple versions of him, and this confusion isn't entirely the fault of alternate futures or time travel either. It's actually more to do with the trajectory of the DC main continuity. Kronos, not to be confused with Kronos, no H, back in the New Earth continuity was known to be a clock-obsessed villain of Ray Palmer's Captain Atom. However, his clock obsession would soon develop into an obsession to perfect the means of time travel, and this obsession would translate to his Prime Earth continuity counterpart, who was an agent of Argus specializing in, you guessed it, time travel. There is also another version of Kronos, which is an entirely different person, Walker Gabriel, who found Clinton's tech and then more used it to become an anti-hero instead of like a full-blown villain. Number 7, Savior. Savior is the future version of Tim Drake from the Titans Tomorrow alternate reality. Here, Tim Drake ended up taking on the mantle of Batman, but would eventually become known as the vigilante Savior. You might be thinking, but Tim Drake is a good guy. He's not evil. What are you talking about? And normally, you'd be right. But in this reality, Tim doesn't end up quite as heroic as the main counterpart had hoped he'd grow up to be. This version of Tim comes to us from a much darker timeline, one where everything got so bad that he and his fellow Titans, known as actually one of the 2 different opposing Titans teams in the future, ended up adopting a zero-tolerance policy for criminals. Eventually, this future version of Tim Drake even ends up wielding the gun used to kill Martha and Thomas Wayne in his fight for vengeance. Basically, he becomes OG Batman, but even darker. Number 6, Monarch. Monarch is another villain from the future who actually, it turns out, was originally a hero. I love these reveals, especially when you are the hero finding out that you become the villain. Gasp. Monarch is actually Hank Hall, who ends up becoming a villain in a dystopian future after his partner Dove dies. For those who don't know, Hank Hall is the hero Hawk of the superhero duo Hawk and Dove. Hank wouldn't be the only hero to become known as the future villain Monarch. In fact, it seems likely much of the villainy behind Monarch comes from the suit that Hank and later Captain Atom wear while donning that mantle. In fact, in the case of Captain Atom, it seems the suit is very much to blame here. Suit making people evil and crazy.
Halfway through into number 5, Technarchy. We all love a good alien invader storyline. They always give us ideas of what to do and what not to do if we ever end up in the same situation making first contact. However, in Marvel's 2099 series, one race of aliens known as the Technarchy is not only a badass name, but the absolute pure definition of demonic cyberpunk, and I think that at this point you can see why. This race of aliens are cybernetic, shape-shifting, and giant techno-organic entities that love violence as all higher life forms do. They were created by the Phalanx, another alien race, but since they love violence, they also hate their creators just for the sake of it. It's so bad in fact that they don't even consider them their creators, and rather just a sucky version of their own species. Yeah, these aliens aliens are racist. And they can also infect organic beings with a techno-organic virus that turns organic matter into technology that I'm guessing they then consume. This is actually insane, but they're my new favorite alien race.
Number 4. Extant. The thing about time traveling characters is that you can have a few different versions of them, whether that be in one single timeline or across multiple timelines. In the case of Extant though, we are fortunately keeping things pretty linear thus far on this list. Extant is actually the name that Hank Hall took up after his Monarch persona, and if you thought Monarch was bad, Hank Hall's Extant is arguably worse. Extant is Monarch, but now not only advanced, but with the ability to time travel. He teams up with Hal Jordan's Parallax, and the two villains plan to take control of time itself so that they might manipulate it as they so desire, altering reality itself. Number 3. Monarch. Monarch was actually revealed to be Hawk of Hawk and Dove, aka Hank Hall. But before we knew that, we simply knew Monarch as a tyrant ruling in a futuristic post-apocalyptic world. It turned out the death of Dove was what had prompted him to turn villain. Though, surprise surprise, Hank would later learn it was him himself from the future as Monarch who was responsible for killing Dove in the past. Lagasp. Hawk would eventually go on to take up another villainous mantle, becoming known as Extant. As Extant, or Extant, Hank would team up with former Green Lantern Hal Jordan, now known as Parallax, during the events of Zero Hour. So yeah, pretty mega bad. Hal and Hank together plan to manipulate time in order to alter reality, making it as they wanted it to be. You know, if you're doing that, you're probably in the wrong. Number 2. Professor Zoom. Professor Zoom is Eobard Thawne, the main villain of Barry Allen's The Flash, who traveled back in time just to mess with the Flash's life. That's how much he hates him. He has also been known as Reverse Flash before in the comics. Eobard Thawne hails from the future of the 25th century in DC Comics, being a very fast speedster powered by the negative speed force. There is much that Eobard can do and accomplish as a villain. Aside from traveling back in time and to other dimensions, he can use his super speed to not only be super fast, but also be super powerful in battle, as his speed also inherently gives him super strength. He also possesses the ability to heal and the ability to manipulate molecules, allowing him to phase through things. Despite being a villain in the New Earth continuity, Thawne even used his molecular manipulation powers at one point to save the DC universe, which I think makes you pretty powerful in my mind. Number 1. Kang the Conqueror. While Kang might look a little silly in the comics with his, his purple helmet and his floating time chair, he is not someone who should be underestimated. Kang hails from the 30th century, where he is believed to either be the descendant of Dr. Doom, Victor Von Doom, or Mr. Fantastic, aka Reed Richards. He is known as Nathaniel Richards in his original future reality of Earth 6311, where he hails from. In fact, a young Nathaniel Richards would go on to become Iron Lad while running from his future self Kang, only to learn that he actually needed to become Kang, or would actually kind of risk the destruction of time and the multiverse itself. That is maybe the most powerful element of Kang. He's like a Marvel absolute, and even though young Nathaniel wanted to become a hero and in essence defeat Kang, he had to accept his destiny or risk destroying multiple universes that have been shaped by a version of Kang and his actions. Kang is basically like integral. If you don't have Kang, everything dies, but if you have Kang in the reality, he's probably gonna try to mess with you. It's like, there's no good answer to Kang.
Starting us off in at number 10, Galactus, the Butcher of Worlds. The immensity of Galactus is already scary to some readers as is, but this famous Marvel antagonist has been depicted over the years in alternate universes to have some of the most terrifying aesthetics and dispositions outside his already overwhelming original persona. Galactus, the Butcher of Worlds is one of those alternate identities from a future timeline. From Earth 14412, appearing as part of the Marvel Now line in Thor God of Thunder issue 19, this Black Galactus has Thor to thank for his transformation. As the story goes, a millennia into the future, after the Earth has died out, Galactus returns to consume the planet. But Thor, now King Thor, is still kicking around and protecting Midgard. He gets nostalgic about Earth and fights Galactus, preventing him from consuming the planet. In the process, Thor uses the all-black Necro Sword, which was previously used by Gore the God Butcher, and Galactus retreats, eating Mars instead. Except now, the Necro Sword has manifested itself inside of him, which drastically changes him into this. In at number 9, Kang the Conqueror. Kang the Conqueror is largely known for his time-traveling shenanigans, and perhaps is the first villain that comes to mind when you think of comic time travelers. Now, because of his time traveling, we've seen multiple iterations of him over the years, including the most recent Iron Lad. Created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, Kang is a fellow named Nathaniel Richards, a 31st century scholar who has a genius-level intellect and is an expert in history. He is also possibly a descendant of Reed Richards, and becomes fascinated by time travel technology created by Dr. Doom. He decides to travel back in time and becomes a pharaoh, and the Fantastic Four, who were time displaced at that time, a lot of time, defeated him. Then, a year later, he appeared in the Avengers issue 8, now fully as Kang, and got into a kerfuffle with the team. Armed with 40th century technology, he's got armor that enhances his strength, he has energy, force field, and hologram projection abilities, his suit has 30 days of food and air supplies, and he can control other forms of technology. Also, he's super resistant to radiation, which probably comes in handy in the future. The Earth is dying.
Number 8. Ravonna, aka Terminatrix. Okay, Ravonna Renslayer made her first appearance in Marvel Comics with Avengers issue 23. She was the daughter of King Kirilius, a ruler in the 40th century. It was the last civilization that wasn't conquered by Kang at this point, but Kang spared them because he caught feelings for Ravonna. Can't help it, you gotta follow the heart. She refused to share the love because he wasn't royalty, but he was determined to win her over. He was so determined that he summoned the Avengers to that timeline just to fight them and embarrass them, and then in turn impress her. Now it worked because in the following issue, when everybody's making a run for it, she can't leave him. Kang knows even this is a bad idea, but love is love, baby, you gotta do what you gotta do. So if he marries Ravonna, Baltag will go against him with Kang's troops, and Baltag did do this. And when he attacked Kang, Ravonna jumped in the way using her last breath to tell Kang she indeed loves him. Cut to Avengers issue 267, Prime Kang was able to go back in time and save her. He altered reality so another version of him died instead of Ravonna. How sweet / confusing. Ravonna's awesome. We get to see her in Loki, and I'm really hoping we get her alternate side as well, the Terminatrix. She's much more of a big deal than the show has revealed yet. She once disguised herself as Nebula in order to infiltrate the Council of Cross-Time Kangs. She's kind of a big deal.
Number 7. Dr. Doom. Weirdly enough, in a way, Dr. Doom is also a villain from the future, as he does like to travel back to the past to enact some villainous plots. He traveled back in time to study with Morgan Le Fay, and he's also gone back in time as well with Iron Man to the period of Arthurian legend. One of his most iconic plots in my mind as well was when he wanted to use the Fantastic Four to help him steal Blackbeard's treasure by traveling back in time and recovering it, which seems like a really easy way to possibly mess up the timeline for a reward that somehow, I don't know, it doesn't really seem worth all that trouble. I know it's a chest of treasure, Doom, historical pirate treasure no less, but is it really worth possibly changing the future for? And messing with time? I don't know.
Number 6. Chronarch. Not to be confused with the 64th century ruler from DC Comics, Chronarch was once a regular man, and he first appeared in Defenders Volume 2, Issue 12. He was a janitor working for a research group who, of course, spilled something that changed his life forever. He spilled something on the Chronoscepter, so in turn it opened up this time vortex, and out came, you guessed it, dinosaurs. Yeah, dinosaurs that he could control. So yeah, I had to include this villain. This guy is nuts. The Chronarch then made a cool suit of armor, of course, to fit the whole theme. And then he set up a camp in an abandoned theme park and ran operations until the Defenders showed up to save the day. Now, I'm upset here because the Defenders sent the dinosaurs back to their time, their Doom timeline, which we all know, instead of just opening a Jurassic Park. Come on guys, think, profit. Come on, you're Marvel, you're Disney, you like money, do this.
Number 5. Zoom. Zoom might not be a villain who is from the future, but he is a villain who could potentially access it and who has gone back to the past, therefore being from the future at that point, to mess about with Wally West's life. Hunter Zolomon was once a good friend and colleague of Wally West's. He had a rough life, and after Wally refused to help him by going back in time and reversing a severe injury of Hunter's, he'd lost the ability to walk and was basically now confined to a wheelchair. Hunter decided he needed to step up and help Wally become the hero he was meant to be. Hunter actually has twisted but ultimately altruistic intentions at heart. His goal is to make Wally's life miserable and give him a more tragic backstory so that Wally would end up being a better hero in the future, more inclined to help other people with their problems because he would understand them better. Of course, the reason the Flash did not decide to help Hunter is because he knew how dangerous messing with the time stream was. He was like, we can't just do that. But to Hunter, who had suffered throughout his life, he didn't see that as the real reason behind Wally wouldn't help. He was like, nah, that's not what it is, it's just you don't get it. Let me go make your life miserable and then you'll get it. You're welcome.
Number 4. Czar. Spider-Man and Wolverine, the Dream Team, involved in a pretty intense storyline. The 2010 six-parter written by Jason Aaron begins with the Orb robbing a bank, which I gotta say would be the weirdest and scariest deposit ever. Spider-Man and Wolverine are on the scene and things seem manageable at first, but when a bag of stolen glowing diamonds hits the ground, the daring duo are transported 60 million years back in time. Wolverine knows after taking one breath that this is not Savage Land. Now they're hanging out and an asteroid is heading for Earth. So much later, when Peter has now grown a beard in this altered timeline, Wolverine is also leading the group, the Small Folk. The diamonds activate again, and this time they're shot into the future. What is going on? Okay, so in issue 2, the Orb asks Peter about the diamonds. These diamonds belong to the Czar. He had them attached to his teeth, real fashionable, real gangster-like. He also has a bat with those diamonds embedded in them. So he has arguably the most dangerous weapon I've ever seen. A bat with time-traveling diamonds sticking out of them. Okay, RIP. His sidekick, Big Murder, was also pretty fashionable. He rocks the Kanye glasses while commuting through the cosmos. It's a pretty good duo. I would never want to fight these guys in any reality, especially not the future.
Number 3. Maestro. The Incredible Hulk has certainly been through the ringer in his decorated career, but few versions of the character are the living embodiment of that fact, like the Maestro. An alternate version of Bruce Banner from an apocalyptic future, this version of the character is far more intense and complex, but also much older. The best way to explain Maestro is to say that he is basically a smarter, older, villainous version of Dr. Bruce Banner with all the powers and abilities of the original, but with a touch of nuclear radiation. He has much more of a cosmic and spiritual side to him than the normal Hulk does, but he is also twice as strong as Hulk is, and he retains all the intelligence of Bruce Banner, but with years and years more experience. Despite all that extra strength, brain power, and experience, he still gets outmaneuvered by the Hulk, who sends Maestro back in time to the site of the gamma bomb that created them. But even then, the Maestro's spirit remains on the bones left behind after the explosion went off and he came back to life. Number 2. Agatha Harkness. Like a few of these villains, when we first met Agatha Harkness in Fantastic Four number 94 from October of 1969, she was already elderly. She started out as the nanny for the newly born Franklin Richards, and using her magical powers, she even saved the Fantastic Four from the Frightful Four and a handful of other villains, and also helped Franklin when his powers first started to emerge. But she went on to have an interesting relationship with the Scarlet Witch, Wanda Maximoff, but also her mother, Natalia Maximoff. That's because this sweet nanny Agatha is actually an incredibly ancient sorcerer who was around to remember the sinking of Atlantis nearly 18,000 years ago. And she was probably the most powerful of the original witches during the Salem witch trials, an event that she actually supported as she thought it would cull the weak magic users who held them back. Agatha, like a lot of older villains, is pretty damn complex. She has helped out heroes on multiple occasions, but she's also done some pretty sinister stuff. But there's no doubt that she is much stronger than both heroes and villains first assume. Number 1. Baron von Strucker. Baron Wolfgang von Strucker was born in the 19th century, so he ain't a young fella by any means. He fought with the Axis powers during World War II alongside and under the Red Skull. He was a top villain at the time, not just for Captain America, but more prominently as an adversary for Nick Fury and the Howling Commandos. And that carried through after the war ended, as Strucker was instrumental in the rise of Hydra and then became the Supreme Hydra. He was even responsible for the corruption of S.H.I.E.L.D., using Hydra to completely take over large parts of S.H.I.E.L.D. itself. When Captain America returned, and then the Red Skull did as well, Strucker began to lose his leadership role within Hydra, and so he faked his own passing, choosing to instead manipulate events from the shadows. Eventually though, Strucker got the Death Spore virus, which is why he is on this list. He's old, and many people don't know he has this particular enhancement. While he is an excellent strategist, a highly intelligent, exceptional hand-to-hand combatant, swordsman, and marksman who uses Hydra tech to live longer and be in top physical condition, the Death Spore virus bonded Strucker's DNA with the Death Spore itself, enabling him to be revived after passing away. He hasn't aged since getting the virus, he heals at an incredible rate, is invulnerable to minor injuries, resistant to toxins and disease, and he can even release the Death Spore virus from his body at will, taking his victims' lives nearly instantly if he chooses to.
Number 10. Vandal Savage. Vandal Savage is definitely one of the most ancient villains out there. It's actually kinda like his whole thing. Savage originally existed all the way back in the prehistoric ages, having initially been a caveman. He got his powers from a radioactive meteorite which granted him immortality and enhanced intelligence. Even way back then, he was fighting heroes like Batman, if you can believe it. This was after Batman was sent on some time adventures after facing off against Darkseid. While he was suspected as being dead, in reality Darkseid's Omega Sanction had simply banished Batman to wander through time, which actually kinda sounds nice to me, except that part of this punishment was that his lives that he would experience were all supposed to be, well, pretty awful. Still though, when facing off against Vandal Savage, even with Vandal's somewhat newfound powers, Batman won. I mean, you can be ancient and immortal, but that doesn't mean that you're immune from being beaten by Batman, right? Batman's got that plot armor, baby. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we're doing here on Top 10 Nerd and you love when I talk about supervillains, I know I do, be sure to check out our supervillains playlist over on the channel for even more good villainous content. Number 9, Surtur. Surtur is not someone we think of too often or even touch on, but he's a pretty big deal in the comics and in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I mean, in the MCU, he successfully managed to destroy Asgard, fulfilling his prophesized role in Ragnarok. And what's more, Thor knew that this was what needed to be done in order to stop his sister Hela. So despite facing off against Surtur initially, he ended up having to be the one to free him so that the prophecy could actually be realized, sacrificing the place of Asgard in order to save the people of Asgard. In the comics, Surtur is an ancient foe, having been the sworn enemy of Odin for, well, pretty much forever. He hails from Muspelheim, and even for years successfully stopped Odin from achieving an alliance between the people of Odin's own Asgardian tribe, the Aesir, and the other Asgardian tribe known as the Vanir. Number 8, Circe. Circe is amazing. Definitely one of my favorite ancient villains around, possibly one of my favorite DC villains of all time around. Being that she is also the Circe from ancient Greek myth, I think you can understand just how old she is. Circe is known for being a powerful witch, and in the Prime Earth continuity was also revealed to be one of Hecate's witch marked. Her insane magical ability is how she has been able to survive for so long, without also appearing to have aged much at all. However, I will also add that in the New Earth continuity, this is also thanks to the fact that Circe is actually descended from Titans, which not only makes her immortal and ageless, but also pretty durable as well. Circe is known for being a powerful Wonder Woman foe, but despite the fact that Wonder Woman is really well known among comic fans, I feel like her villains get less time in the spotlight for, I don't know, for some reason, despite the fact that Wonder Woman actually has a pretty stacked rogues gallery all her own. And like Circe, many of them also seem to have a rich and interesting history. Seriously, I feel like Circe could just like have her own comic series. That's how much she has and has had going on throughout her life and throughout the comics. Number 7, Morgan Le Fay. Speaking of powerful witches, Morgan Le Fay is a villain we really don't get to showcase or focus on a lot on this channel, so I am taking this opportunity to remind you of just how ancient and how bad she is. Morgan Le Fay is a villain who hails originally from Arthurian legend and was adopted as a character in Marvel Comics all the way back in 1955, making her first appearance in Black Knight issue number 1. But of course, she's actually much older than 1955 in terms of her canon character history. Morgan Le Fay existed just after the ancient and mythical times of the island of Atlantis. In this version of the story, not all of the island was lost, and actually some islands that were part of Atlantis still existed, chiefly Avalon, which is where Morgan was born. Unfortunately, the remaining isles of Atlantis would eventually also be drowned and swallowed up by the sea, causing Morgan, her mother, and the man who would become known as Merlin to flee to Britain. This all happened before the 6th century, with Morgan eventually temporarily becoming Merlin's apprentice. As a villain, Morgan has not only tormented the people of her own time period, but she has also traveled to the present day and threatened the people and heroes of that time as well. Number 6, Barbatos. Barbatos is the Bat God, who basically helped Batman to become what he is today, but as part of his own dark machinations. At least, you know, Barbatos claims to be that. According to Barbatos, he was the bat that appeared before Bruce the night that he decided to become Batman, inspiring the young Bruce Wayne to go on to don the cape and cowl, and becoming a major symbol for Batman. Barbatos was once the loyal ally of the World Forger. He was a dragon who would destroy worlds that were unstable, often built on fear, known as belonging to the Forge of Worlds. Barbatos, however, grew to enjoy destroying worlds so much that he actually decided to rebel against the World Forger so he could destroy more worlds, ultimately destroying his master, which allowed him to corrupt his Forge of Worlds, with it warping and ultimately becoming known by a name you might be more familiar with, the Dark Multiverse. Just as the World Forger is one of the oldest beings in the cosmos over at DC, so is his pet dragon gone rogue, Barbatos. Barbatos would go on to recruit others to his new purpose to destroy the main multiverse. Number 5. Joe Chill. While we didn't know who he was at the time, Joe Chill would go on to become a huge supervillain in Batman's life. He would be known to Bruce Wayne as the man responsible for the death of Batman's parents. Well, responsible. More, he was known as the perpetrator. The circumstances surrounding the murder of Martha and Thomas Wayne in regards to it being part of a great plot or just a random mugging gone wrong would continue to be explored even after we found out Joe Chill's name. Either way, Joe Chill has been a huge villain in Batman's life anyways, because he took away Bruce Wayne's parents, which is kinda Batman's whole thing. Number 4. The Monk. The Monk first appeared in Detective Comics issue number 31, shortly after Batman's first appearance a few issues previously. He is often dressed in red robes, but his first appearance also featured him wearing a red cloth bag with eye holes on his head, marked with a skull and crossbones. So stylish. This was way back when Bruce Wayne also had a fiancée named Julie. The Monk ends up hypnotizing and kidnapping Julie. Batman, however, ends up chasing him down and facing a castle filled with booby traps in order to save his fiancée, who does not know apparently that her betrothed Bruce is actually the Bat. The issue ends with Batman swearing vengeance, soaring off to Hungary to find the Monk and his werewolves? I just love that part because I'm always like, wait, what do you mean you're going after his werewolves? He has werewolves? What? Did we find that out in that issue? I don't remember that being mentioned, but maybe I forgot. Number 3. Dr. Death. While his New 52 appearance is terrifying, Dr. Death actually first appeared in Detective Comics Volume 1, issue number 29, and looked just like your average mad scientist guy. He was one of the first supervillains that Batman ever encountered and is often known as a producer of biological weapons. You know, evil mad science stuff. Like most of Batman's supervillains, he isn't superpowered himself. His first appearance saw him being apprehended by Batman only to go down in a blaze of flames, though at least Batman tried to stop him from going down in a blaze of glory by tossing a fire extinguisher at him. So helpful, Batman, thanks for that. Needless to say, this wouldn't be the end of Dr. Death, and we would definitely see him again. Now he's got that crazy bone serum that just makes bones grow everywhere. Used it himself, so he's got these crazy teeth. You should show them the picture. Number 2. Ultra Humanite. One of Superman's first foes before Lex Luthor even. I know, it's crazy. If you haven't noticed yet, comics both seemed to act as a celebration for science while also having an obsession for its less honorable uses via mad science, as we like to call it. That's its own category of science for you science nerds out there. Just kidding. I know mad science isn't an actual category, but it should be. Apparently old school views were that science is awesome but can also be super dangerous, which, I mean, true. Ultra Humanite's brand of mad science came in the form of body swapping. A brilliant mind trapped in a frail, old, crippled body, Geralt dreamed of setting himself free of his decrepit and failing body and conquering the world. Just normal dreams, you know how it is. Becoming Ultra Humanite, he is known for inhabiting various female bodies in the DC universe, including Tara's for a time. Kinda weird. And for inhabiting the body of an albino ape. Those are his things. He's into apes and swapping bodies with ladies. It's normal. It's fine. Number 1. Time Trapper. He's a time trap. Or she, depending on which story you're reading in regards to this character's true identity. Multiple true identities over here. Time Trapper has been implied to be a few different people when it comes to their true identity. One of the more notable folks who has been the implied true identity of the villain is Superboy Prime. If that was true, or I guess when that was true perhaps I should say, then that would make Time Trapper pretty crazy powerful, both strength-wise and of course power-wise as well. The Time Trapper throughout the years has been shown to have crazy control over time. They can block time travel, manipulate someone else's time stream, aging them prematurely for example, and can even take entire planets out of time, slicing pieces of that time off to capture them for their own use. It's been theorized by Brainiac 5 that what Time Trapper really may be is a sentient alternate timeline, forever in a constant battle or struggle with the main one. Number 10. Cosmic Ghost Rider. What happens when Frank Castle becomes a Ghost Rider just as planet Earth is dying and there is no one left to avenge? Well, you get the brilliant and insane Cosmic Ghost Rider. This version of Frank Castle ended up teaming up with Galactus originally in order to try and take on Thanos, who threatened the existence of all life at the time as he tried to win the heart of Mistress Death. In the end, no one was left to serve but Thanos, and Cosmic Ghost Rider was driven mad by loneliness and heartbreak and being unable to die, so he eventually ended up joining Thanos anyways. He is as powerful as he is insane at this point and is a frighteningly cheerful version of Frank Castle, especially considering all of the horrors he's witnessed, especially when he was serving Thanos. Did some pretty bad stuff. Number 9, Annihilus. Annihilus is a somewhat lost being who was created in the negative zone on a planet known as Athros. He evolved from life spores that were left there and ended up mutating and growing to be a highly intelligent insectoid-like life form. He has been an enemy and ally to the Fantastic Four, depending on the circumstances, and he also once almost took over Asgard, managing to take on the Asgardian soldiers and even beat Thor. Thankfully, Odin stopped him before he could succeed. Poor Annihilus, I feel like he's so lost in life. Really needs a stronger purpose. Number 8, Iowa the Mungazoth. Hope I'm saying that right. Known as the Lord of Darkness, Iowa the Mungazoth is called upon in an issue of Creatures on the Loose from the 70s. This cosmic eldritch god-like entity could also be tied to the many-angled ones, who occasionally crop up in the Marvelverse. But we don't have enough information to really know whether or not for sure if Iowa the Mungazoth is a separate entity or simply one that we've maybe already met but is operating under a different name, under some kind of alias. He is one of the gods referred to in the comic by the High Priest of the Dragon King, known as Sa. Sa, in the story, aims to make 3 human sacrifices in order to give the energy to the Lords of Chaos that they need so that they may travel across the cosmos to Earth. Sounds like a bad idea. Sounds like you probably don't want the Lords of Chaos to come by, but you know, to each their own. I guess if you're the High Priest of the Dragon King, you do. That's what you want. I'm not here to judge. Number 7, God Quarry. In 2016's Thanos series, there's a place known as the God Quarry. It is a pit guarded by 3 eternal witches, known as the Coven. The pit is said to reward those who can overcome its challenges by granting them with great power. But first, you must face whatever it is that could potentially be holding you back. Once in the pit, you find yourself merged within it, becoming a part of it, and then you begin to see what it is that could most tempt you. For me, it would probably be a big pile of cookies. For many leaders who have come there seeking power, the temptation was too great and they could not escape. Instead, now a part of the pit, they remain trapped for eternity. But hey, with great risk comes great reward. And yeah, Thanos did have to go in that pit. And what happens? You're gonna have to read the series. I don't want to spoil it. Number 6, the Universal Church of Truth. Almost a misnomer, the Universal Church of Truth is not as innocent as it sounds. It is made up of believers from planets throughout the universe who worship the evil being known as Magus. The church invades planets, and if the planet's inhabitants refuse to accept and adopt their faith, they will burn it to the ground, killing anyone who refuses to join them. They're basically like a really insane cult that invades, converts, and conquers planets. So yeah, they sound better than they are.
Number 5, Dormammu. Dormammu, I've come to bargain. Dormammu, I've come to bargain. Dormammu, yeah, you get it. You saw the movie, you know what I'm doing. Doctor Strange's greatest nemesis is also one of the most powerful ancient evils in the Marvel Universe across the multiverse. Ruler of the Dark Dimension, Dormammu is an interdimensional entity capable of existing for eons, capable of all sorts of impressive magical feats like conjuration, being able to summon creatures under his dominion, even bending the law of physics to his will. Dormammu is already crazy strong, but it's only amplified more if he's in the Dark Dimension, his home turf. Now he doesn't just get a home field advantage by being there because the sun's not in his eyes. He's able to siphon energy directly from the Dark Dimension to fuel himself, as well as draining his followers for their energy. Dormammu is the perfect foil for a hero like Doctor Strange, an incredibly powerful, omnipotent being who can't be defeated outright with traditional brawls or fisticuffs, and needs to be outsmarted and outmaneuvered. Luckily, the Sorcerer Supreme usually has a handle on it. Usually.
Number 4, the Chaos King. The entity known as Amatsu Mikubashi, originally was portrayed as the Japanese god of evil, but in actuality, he was an offshoot of Oblivion, the cosmic entity embodying the void that existed before the universe began. Because of course he was. An incarnation of the primordial darkness and chaos that existed before the universe, the Chaos King exists as a dark counterpart to the cosmic being Eternity. That by itself makes Amatsu an incredibly powerful being on a cosmic level. In a mission to bring everything to chaos, he started waging war on all the gods of every pantheon in the universe, and he actually did defeat and take control of almost all of them. It took a combined effort of heroes plus Hercules, who was amped up to incredibly insane godlike levels, to take him down in the Chaos War storyline. Absolutely check it out if you haven't already, it's fantastic.
Number 3, Mephisto. If you're not a big comics fan, maybe you recognize the name Mephisto from countless Reddit threads and headlines saying he'd be appearing in the next episode of WandaVision somewhere. Remember how convinced we all were? Simpler days. So just who is Mephisto actually? Well, basically for all intents and purposes, he's the Marvel Comics version of Satan. Where things get incredibly confusing is that he's not actually Satan, because that's a separate character in the Marvel Universe, but he's his own evil, powerful entity, and boy is he that. Mephisto is a long-standing evil, responsible for a lot of some of the biggest suffering in the Marvel Universe. He captured Doctor Doom's mother's soul, he bonded Johnny Blaze to the Ghost Rider, and those are just some of his lesser feats. Mephisto is capable of full-scale reality alteration, like when he infamously changed the entire Marvel timeline to erase Peter and Mary Jane's marriage in exchange for healing Aunt May. Also, he could nip a timeline in the bud where he was defeated by Spider-Man's daughter. You gotta respect that level of pettiness. He hasn't shown up in the MCU yet, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if he's coming soon. Just give it some time. One more day, maybe.
And in at number 2 is Sidorak. Sidorak, also known as the Destroyer, Lord of Oblivion, and Master of the Raging Storm, is an immensely powerful extra-dimensional being hailing from the Crimson Cosmos. He was worshipped as a god and a demon by the primitive humans of Earth until he was banished back to the Crimson Cosmos. As the Destroyer, Sidorak's main goal is to just cause destruction and raise destructive power. To do this from the Crimson Cosmos, and also to win a wager with 8 other deities like himself, he created the Crimson Gem of Sidorak, which allows him to select a person to be his avatar, enhancing them to become the indestructible and immortal Juggernaut, like Kane Marco and the other avatars. Now, if you pay close attention to the magic wielders in the Marvel Universe, particularly Doctor Strange, you will hear them invoking Sidorak's name to cast some of their strongest spells. For example, the Crimson Bands of Sidorak. He doesn't really show up a lot in the pages of Marvel Comics, but when he does, it's always as this super imposing, terrible force.
And finally, coming in at the number 1 spot, well, it only made sense to have this below everyone else, the one below all. Yeah. Kinda hard to top that. The one below all is the dark side of the one above all, the highest form of creation in the Marvel Multiverse. If the one above all is the embodiment of all the compassion and love that exists out there, well then the one below is the opposite of that and the beautiful embodiment of all the hatred and rage that's inside us all. It's a bit of an eldritch creature existing in the lowest points of reality, you know, below all, quite literally, it's in the name. It's responsible for all the gamma radiation in the world, as this is how it manifests itself throughout the multiverse. All of Hulk's rage and anger stems from drops of hatred of the one below all, just a tiny fraction of what it could be capable of. The one below all has existed before the multiverse, the universe itself even, and is thought to ultimately be the harbinger of all evil that's ever manifested in the Marvel Universe. Considering how much darkness, how much hate, how much evil exists out there, that's gotta count for something. Mephisto was unable to thwart the one below all, saying it was more powerful than he was. Bruce Banner theorized that no, God of the Symbiotes was just another avatar of the one below all, meaning when it comes to ultimate evil, it's kinda hard to top something below it all.
And for this list, starting off at number 10 is Magneto. Starting off this list with the absolute GOAT. Magneto has been around for a long time, and a majority of that time, he was a villain, or at best, an anti-hero. As the number 1 rival of Professor Charles Xavier, Magneto's view of the world is pretty interesting given that he was the child of a Jewish family during World War II, and yet, after years of persecution for being a mutant, he believed his race to be superior to regular humans nonetheless, and that humans should be subservient or destroyed. Under this mentality, he led the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants as well as other groups against the X-Men and the Earth's heroes. Now everybody knows that Magneto is not someone you mess with. He has enough power and enough experience to stomp almost anyone. For example, while he has become more of just a hero nowadays, there's a point where he gets his heart ripped out by a villain called Uranos. But he keeps himself alive by using his powers to keep his blood flowing. He's just that insanely powerful. But being born around World War II and the rival to Charles Xavier, he's been up there in the age department since he was introduced, but always manages to decimate his enemies. Number 9, Cassandra Nova. Sticking with X-related heroes, we have the evil twin, or counterpart, or anti-self to Charles Xavier. Cassandra Nova isn't really a mutant, but she isn't really a person either. She is actually what is known as a Mumadrai, the spirit that is equal to the opposite of a person. Wrap your head around that one. This is about to get wild, so buckle up. Because of the genetic mutant potential of Charles Xavier, his Mumadrai was able to create a physical form for itself when Sharon Xavier was pregnant with Charles, making Cassandra basically Xavier's twin. Now Charles, even as a baby, sensed Cassandra as an evil presence, and he used his psychic abilities to try and take her out in the womb. Cassandra survived though, and so she spent decades as this terrifying mass of cells in a sewer, building herself a new body and planning her revenge on her brother. Cassandra has all the same telepathic powers as Charles himself, plus some telekinetic abilities as well. But being a Mumadrai, she has the terrifying ability to manipulate DNA, breaking it down, copying it, and being able to construct physical bodies. She can even phase through solid objects, regenerate insanely fast, and enhance and evolve other mutant abilities. Number 8, Granny Goodness. Stepping away from Marvel for a moment, Granny Goodness is probably the complete opposite of anything we would describe as goodness. She was originally one of the lowlies, which is basically the peasant class on DC Universe's Apocalypse. From a younger age, she was taken by Darkseid and raised and trained to become head of the Shock Troops and the Female Furies. She has the responsibility to bring young warriors from other worlds to fight each other to earn the right to be trained by her. But Granny Goodness also has multiple orphanages where she both trains and disciplines younger individuals looking for potential warriors for Darkseid. Now, being a resident of Apocalypse, Granny here does have quite a bit of power. She has superhuman strength, speed, durability, and senses, as well as invulnerability and an advanced immune system and immortality. But being immortal doesn't necessarily save you from looking old as hell, which is why we get Granny Goodness. Number 7, Horticulture. You know, sometimes a group of villains comes along that just kind of makes me smile. And Horticulture, who first appeared in X-Men Volume 5, Number 3 in December 2019, are one such group. Horticulture is described on their wiki as a group of agrochemists, biotechnologists, and eugenic engineers who specialize in the genetic manipulation and propagation of all things botanical. So, to me and my tiny brain, I take that information and translate it to, it's a bunch of old plant scientist ladies. Because that's what they are. It's a bunch of older ladies who are seeking to radically depopulate humans from the earth in order to bring the earth and nature to a state of balance. With the climate the way it is right now, it's actually kind of an understandable cause, even if it's utterly insane. Using their know-how, they made biological modifications to themselves, like resistance to telepathy and extended lifespans, but they also developed technology to manipulate their environment, inhibit mutant powers, and generate illusions on men. But they also have experience as computer programmers, being able to access the Krakoan gateways and trade information with the villainous anti-mutant group known as Orcus. Number 6, Old Loki from the MCU. Alright, I'm going to step away from the pages of comic books altogether here. During the MCU's Loki show, Loki gets sent to the Void, where the whole place is basically filled with other alternate versions of himself. But he specifically became part of a group of 4 other Lokis: Boastful Loki, Alligator Loki, Kid Loki, and the topic for today, Classic Loki. Classic Loki had a similar story to regular Loki from the Sacred Timeline, but when confronted by Thanos in Avengers Infinity War, this Loki decided to use duplication magic to survive the whole thing. He then spent a hell of a long time on a remote planet, ashamed of the nefarious things he had done over time. When he finally tried to return to see his brother, Thor, who he missed, he was an older man, and them meeting caused caused a divergent timeline, getting himself pruned and sent to the void. He has probably one of the best moments in the show. When Sylvie, Loki, and Mobius try to escape from the void, and the reality-consuming Alioth tries to stop them, classic Loki uses his magic to create a true-to-life, massive illusion of Asgard itself, all while this weird version of Ride of the Valkyries was playing in the background, distracting Alioth and giving me just straight up goosebumps. Like, I am actually getting them right now just thinking about it. Like, it was such a cool moment. Satisfying.
Number 5. Superman. John Kent in Future State takes up the mantle of Superman after his father. This also happens after his father left Earth, and many of those who he helped believe that he actually has gone missing, possibly to never return. That's what people think is going on with OG Superman. Well, we skip through the future timeline and Future State with this version of John from this future being shown as a very heroic character. We also see some things that he does in this futuristic timeline that seem, well, not so heroic. Like when he bottled the city of Metropolis. John believed he had no other choice and that this was kind of the most peaceful solution to fixing the problems that the city faced at the time. However, he later is forced to confront the fact that he took away the freedom of the people of Metropolis when he made this choice for them. Future State John Kent is dangerous because he is willing to do whatever it takes to protect the city of Metropolis, which sometimes means taking actions that other heroes like Supergirl find questionable.
Moving on to number 4, Old Man Banner. Old Man Banner definitely falls into the disturbing category of our list. Old Man Banner is from the same universe as Old Man Logan, and is the primary antagonist of that storyline, or rather, the ultimate boss battle for Logan in it. In that 2008 story, supervillains have taken over the universe and many of the superheroes are dead. Now when that takeover was happening, Wolverine was tricked into believing that the X-Men were all villains, so he attacked them and killed them. When the illusion was lifted, all he saw was their maimed dead corpses, which drove him into seclusion, swearing that he would never unleash his claws again. Fast forward to much later. Logan has kept his promise and has settled down, now with a wife and children. But he is not by any means free. The Hulk actually owns the land that he lives on and is effectively his landlord, and isn't a good one. When Logan can't pay off his debt, he ends up agreeing to take a now blind Hawkeye across the Savage Land. But when he returns, he learns that Banner ordered his family to be killed anyway. So he goes after Banner, who in this universe has been driven mad by gamma radiation, and has had a bunch of inbred children with his cousin, She-Hulk. When the two duke it out, he literally eats Logan, who then unleashes his claws and digs his way out of Banner's stomach, inevitably killing him.
And at 3, Maestro. Speaking of the Hulk, Maestro from the Future Imperfect storyline is actually the version of Hulk present in the Old Man Logan series. First appearing in the Incredible Hulk Future Imperfect #1 from 1992, Maestro possesses Bruce Banner's intelligence and the Hulk's more malevolent personality traits. After a devastating nuclear war destroyed most of the human race, the radiation from the war ended up basically supercharging the Hulk, turning him into an even more powerful version. He then ended up violently interacting with his cousin, She-Hulk, which resulted in the birth of the Hulk gang. Yeah, I know I said I didn't want to get into it, but at this point I kind of have to explain this. This is absolutely terrifying because while Hulk is already a freaking monster, add more radiation, more power, and the destruction of a whole country, and Bruce Banner's intelligence, there's certainly something to be scared of. Not only that, but this was in 1992. They ran this story along with the whole Hulk gang thing in 1992. Nobody would do this now, let alone 1992. That just seems like that's insane to me.
And at number 2, Injustice Superman. Injustice Superman is the product of the Joker tricking the Man of Steel into killing his pregnant wife, Lois Lane. As you can imagine, when Clark finds out the truth, he loses it. Not even Batman can stop the Man of Tomorrow from thrusting his fist through the chest of the Joker in one of the most gruesome moments in alternate Superman history. This is the catalyst to the Injustice storyline, a world in which Superman becomes a tyrant, ruling supreme, opposed by a rebellion led by none other than Batman. Believing that he and other metahumans are meant to police the world in order to make it a better place, he goes too far, becoming a racist dictator. It's both an Elseworlds comic tale and the primary plot of 2 Injustice video games, the latter being more impressive than the former, if we're being honest. And last but not least, in at number 1, Maestro Hulk. Maestro Hulk is Hulk at his absolute prime, but insane and completely, totally evil, and arguably one of the biggest threats on this list, because it's a Hulk who not only is immortal and has unlimited power the angrier he gets, but also a Hulk who is cunning and intelligent. Let's backtrack for a hot sec though. First appearing in the Incredible Hulk Future Imperfect issue 1 back in 1992, this version of Banner is from Earth 9200, which takes place 100 years into the future after a nuclear war killed off most of Earth's superheroes. The planet is on the brink of extinction, and Hulk has seized control of it. He's been driven mad by the nuclear radiation and is bitter at the world for how he had been treated in the past. That's a deadly combination. He's also stronger than the regular Banner, with the radiation increasing his strength.
Kicking off the list at number 10, the Maestro. The Maestro first appeared in Hulk Future Imperfect. Now this is a crazy version of the Hulk, of course from an alternate future, 100 or so years later. Now this is after the world has fallen apart due to a nuclear war. Nearly every superhero had been killed off at this point. It was a grim future, that's for sure. Now radiation was killing off average Joes like us, but for the Hulk, I mean, he just absorbed all of this. He got stronger, and dare I say it, he got smarter. The only way to defeat this older, now bearded Hulk was to go back in time using Doom's time machine and using that first gamma explosion to wipe him off the map so he never existed. I hope we can see this guy in the MCU. He can connect with astral beings, so maybe Strange will have him in some alternate reality in the next Doctor Strange sequel. Fingers crossed, I'm hoping.
And at 9, Gore. Gore, also known as Gore the God Butcher, was born on a planet with no name. Almost every day was spent starving with no food. He was taught to trust in the gods, but they never answered his prayers. At an early age, his mother and father died, leaving Gore to fend for himself, which sucks even if you aren't on the brink of starvation. Years later, he married and fathered some children. However, most of them died. Man, this guy has a great life. Gore's pregnant spouse Aura was also killed during an earthquake, and one by one his children started dying off until he was left with his one son, Agar. He lost faith that the gods he was taught to trust even existed, but when he learned that they did in fact exist, he sought to punish them for not saving his family, despite his desperate pleas. Which I guess is an understandable reaction, but if I found out gods like Thor, Odin, and Zeus and Hades actually existed, I wouldn't think that they could hear my prayers. Cause even if they're gods, they're still, in a way, people, right? Plus, a god killer, it's very forward thinking.
Number 8, Old Man Logan. Old Man Logan stays a hero in the future, but only because he doesn't have much other choice, really. Really, all Logan wants to do is live his life without having to think too much of all the deaths of his friends that he's responsible for. Logan, in the alternate future of Earth 807128, ends up killing all of his fellow X-Men after being tricked into thinking they were all villains by Mysterio. Not only was he capable of causing all of that death, but further into the future, he goes up against a powerful and horrific villain in his time and reality, facing the head of the Hulk gang and also sort of his landlord, Pappy Banner, aka Old Man Hulk. Something went wrong with Bruce Banner as time went on in this reality, and he basically lost his mind, likely as a result of that gamma radiation affecting him well into his elder years, and not in a good way. Logan ends up being swallowed whole by Hulk, but defeats him in the end by cutting his way out of Old Man Hulk's gut. It's pretty gross.
2. Moving on to number 7, Dark Beast. Dark Beast is a product of the Age of Apocalypse timeline, known as Earth 295. Now this is an alternate future timeline in which Charles Xavier is dead and Apocalypse managed to take over all of North America. Magneto leads the resistance. He's also shacking up with Rogue, not that it matters, but just to paint a picture for y'all. Anyway, Dark Beast is Hank McCoy, except he is a straight up evil mad scientist. He's a twisted, inhumane, sadistic genius who lacks Xavier's guidance and isn't part of the X-Men. Rather, he works for Apocalypse, becoming one of the most prominent geneticists who devoted his time to creating the fittest of beings for the villain, second to only Mr. Sinister's counterpart, Sinister, who was one of Apocalypse's horsemen. Dark Beast would conduct horrific experiments and eventually found his way into the 616 for a brief period of time, causing quite the stir in that universe.
Number 6, The Fallen One. The Fallen One is a version of Norrin Radd who comes from a very dark future where Thanos wins. He first appeared in issue 15 of Thanos from 2016 in the Thanos wins storyline. While he is pretty swiftly defeated, it is only because those he goes up against are even more deadly than him. And even then, it takes a few issues before the fight against him is actually concluded. So it's not like you're in, you're out. It's not a one and done. It's a few issues. Norrin Radd, aka the Silver Surfer, became the Fallen One after he was imbued with black matter and also boasts, of course, of the power cosmic, in addition to wielding Thor's hammer Mjolnir. He also comes leading the charge of the Annihilation Wave, so he's got a lot going on. He got all this power in the hopes of standing a chance in the final showdown with Thanos as one of the last beings left alive in the universe, one of the final people to actually fight him. Sadly, he does fail, but he still manages to look deadly and badass while doing so. So you gotta give him some points for that.
Halfway through and in number 5, Captain America 3099. Being used as a skin in the game Marvel Future Fight, Captain America 3099 is in essence Captain America, but make it RoboCop. He has a holographic shield that still actually works like a shield, but is probably one of the coolest and weirdest versions of Captain America I've ever seen. It looks really sweet, and I'd love to see someone cosplay this. Like, maybe I'll be able to like grab a piece of like acrylic or something and make the shield myself, because like you can put the LEDs and stuff. It's dope. But he is, after all, the same old Captain America. So pretty powerful, but not as powerful as some other heroes. But I'm actually serious though, someone needs to make this shield. Whether it's the hacksmith or Odin makes or something, I'll make this shield, okay? I will happily do my best to get the rest of the costume together, because this is like my next goal.
Number 4, King Thor. King Thor might be one of the most powerful future heroes on this list, but he also is only so deadly and dangerous because he's living in a time where he has to be. King Thor is the alternate future version of Thor from the alternate Earth of 14412. Here Thor goes on to become the Allfather and lives beyond the point where Midgard becomes a lifeless husk as a result of Thor's once more again villainous brother Loki, the god of mischief. At one point while battling Doom in the future, King Thor is granted the Phoenix Force by Logan, who is currently bonded to it at that time, and is able to use that power to defeat Doom. Considering that King Thor will do whatever it takes to defeat those who would oppose him, and considering how much power he wields, even when he doesn't have the Phoenix Force, I'd say he's a pretty dangerous future hero. I wouldn't want to go up against him.
Moving on to number 3, Genocide. We're going to be talking about a DC character at this number. Genocide, the character. We're not getting that dark today, my friends. Well, maybe a little. Genocide is a pretty morbid character. She was created from the corpse of Wonder Woman in a storyline called Rise of the Olympian after Diana's body was stolen by Ares and then brought back in time during Gail Simone's run on the Wonder Woman series. It gets more grim than that. Ares imbued Wonder Woman's body with energy from soil samples pulled across the globe from places where genocides occurred. So yeah, this includes Auschwitz and Rwanda. And on Genocide's very first encounter with Wonder Woman, she kicked her butt and also stole her lasso of truth. Yikes.
Number 2, Booster Gold. Booster Gold is demonstrably dangerous as a hero from the future, mainly because he has no idea what he's doing. He has tons of knowledge of what is meant to happen in the main continuity and present day that he traveled to from the future, but he has no idea of how messing with the past timeline or anything like that could affect the present day or its future. We see how dangerous he can be when he attempts to even do good, like saving Bruce's parents in the past so that they can be there for his wedding. Unfortunately, in doing so, completely messes with the timeline to the point that Booster is actually forced to travel back in time and make sure that Bruce's parents are killed and that poor young Bruce is basically there to witness their deaths. It's also kind of implied that Booster being there and fixing all of that is actually what caused their deaths. It's pretty crazy, it's pretty trippy. Booster might have some valuable knowledge as someone from the future, but he doesn't have the finesse needed to know when the timeline can be tweaked and when it should be left alone to avoid catastrophes from manifesting in the future. Basically, do not let Booster time travel and mess with the timeline. It is not a good idea. Number 1, Iron Lad. Iron Lad is not specifically from the future, but he does go on to become a very dangerous villain who returns from the future. Iron Lad, who was a member of the Young Avengers, it turns out is actually destined to become Kang the Conqueror, who has many different villainous personas throughout the years. I won't go into them right now, but you know some of them. And he's also known for his time travel antics. He often travels back through to the past from the future to enact all kinds of elaborate plots. As a Mortis, he had a hand in creating White Vision. Kang also at one point turns Iron Man evil, brainwashing him into becoming his loyal servant and villainous right-hand man. He's basically behind a lot of evil things that you're like, what is even happening here? And then it'll be like, haha, it was Kang the whole time. Possibly what we'll see in the MCU. I'm placing my bets. Because sadly, I don't think I'm getting Norman Osborn in this phase.
And at 10, Spider-Man Reign. I love talking about Spider-Man Reign because honestly, it's pretty damn ridiculous. Spider-Man Reign was Marvel's counter to the Dark Knight Returns storyline from DC. Set 30 years in the future, Peter has retired and Mary Jane is dead. The mayor of New York has taken control of the cities in more ways than just being the mayor, and when JJJ gets Spider-Man back, the mayor releases the Sinister Six from prison, including versions of Electro, Mysterio, Kraven, Sandman, Scorpion, and Hydro Man, as well as a dead Doc Ock tentacle who saves Peter's life after his mask was ripped off in front of a crowd. Doc Ock's final command to his tentacles was to show Peter 3 grave markers, those of Mary Jane, May Parker, and Ben Parker. After being buried in Mary Jane's coffin by Octopus's tentacle and coming face to face with and conquering his inner demons, Peter emerges in his famous red and blue suit, which he had secretly buried with her. Cause yeah. It's also revealed that the mayor, Edward Sachs, is actually Venom, who plans to turn all of New York into an army of symbiotes. But the worst part is when it's revealed that MJ died because of Peter's radioactive swimmers. I guess having a kid with a superhero is a kinda risky business. Give me that episode of Sex Send Me to the ER. Oh man. In at 9, The Dark Knight Returns. As you can expect when Batman has to, return, Batman was retired and Gotham City had become a haven for all sorts of violent gangs. But before you can say why so serious, the man is back in action and gets yet another new Robin to help clean up the streets of his city. But I know what you're thinking. Batman cannot be street sweeper certified, and you're probably right, but what I mean is he's back to fighting crime. But of course, no alternate universe dystopian Batman story would be complete without a take on the Joker, who still represents the same anarchy threatening to destroy society. I think he's trying to fix it. On the other side though is Superman, a tool of the authoritarian government who wants Batman out of the picture. And as always, it's up to Bruce to find the perfect balance between law and order. Perfectly balanced as all things should be. I love when the superheroes are old though and still try to fight crime. Like I just picture my great-grandfather like trying to kick like some thug who's like at his nursing home trying to take his shampoo. Just, yeah. That's what I imagine. And at 8, The Ray. Set on an Earth where Germany won World War II, it can make things pretty clear when you're talking about a dystopia. The Ray is a member of the resistance fighting against the German soldiers, and is the primary protagonist of Freedom Fighters The Ray, which is an animated series set in the Arrowverse. The Ray in the crossover at least is shown to be quite powerful, being able to take down Red Tornado from what I can remember. This dude also has like a really cool suit, and in the show is either married to or dating Captain Cold, which is sweet. He gained his powers after the original Ray died in front of him, and he was also included in the comic adaptation of the Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover, which was already adapted from the original comic event, but this one is based off the CW with Felicity and other people. However, the Ray was destroyed along with his Earth in the TV version of the crossover, but in the comics he was killed along with Felicity and Nyssa. This guy has some mad superpowers though, like super strength, flight, light energy blasts, light speed, invisibility, photokinesis allowing him to make solid light constructs, bioluminescence, and that's not even the whole list. Okay, it's freaking nuts, man.
Number 7, Green Lantern. Jessica Cruz from our time might not be quite so dangerous yet, but when we glimpsed into her possible future in the Future State line from DC, we learned that there is a future version of her who becomes a Yellow Lantern, joining the Sinestro Corps. Not all Yellow Lanterns are bad, but because they are generally about instilling fear in others, they more often than not tend to end up becoming deadly supervillains. And that's usually who they are. Jessica Cruz found herself stranded on a Green Lantern base and outpost without her powers, and when Sinestro Corps members showed up to investigate, found herself offered a Yellow Lantern ring after her fight against them had resulted in her overcoming her own fears and instilling fear into the hearts of her enemies. Which I'm not gonna lie, I really like that twist in the future for Jessica. I think Jessica as a Yellow Lantern is really cool.
And at 6, Injustice Flash. But what about a world where Superman was tricked into killing Lois Lane and his unborn son by the Joker who made him hallucinate fighting Doomsday, but then also nukes Metropolis? That's a thing that happened and it was absolutely brutal. So Superman ends up killing the Joker and then gets a taste for it, basically becoming a dictator of the world and then turning it into a dystopia where his word is law. Batman among others obviously fight it, but one of the superheroes who joins Superman is actually the Flash, who is still super fast, but now he works for a totalitarian regime. He does end up defecting, but let's be honest, he's more powerful when he's working with Superman because everyone ends up fearing him. He could shove a vibrating hand through your chest faster than you could say your own name. Just the thought of Superman having a speedster in his corner is enough to make your spine shiver.
In our number 5 spot, Bruce Banner of Earth 9591. So from here on out, we've got quite the selection of Bruce Banner alternates for you all. Starting off with this one from Earth 9591, also known as the Ruins universe. Now for context, Ruins is a 1995 limited series that follows a former Daily Bugle reporter named Phil Sheldon as he navigates a dystopian alternate reality in which, according to him, I quote, "everything that can go wrong will go wrong." Now in comparison to the 616, it is a reality filled with experiments and accidents that resulted in painful deaths and horrible deformities rather than individuals with superpowers. This version of Banner is no exception. He was horrifically mutated after saving Rick Jones during the Gamma Bomb experimentation that would normally give him his powers. On this much more realism-inspired Earth, the exposure transformed him into a mass of pulsating green tumors. He would eventually be captured and held by the CIA, not that it would improve his existence anymore though. And if that doesn't freak you out, the description of this Banner via Rick Jones describing his transformation likely will. I quote, "It hurt to look at him. His skin went black and dry and cracked, and light shone out of him, like all his meat was on fire. Then he started to swell, and then the tumors broke him open." I mean, when someone describes you as all of your meat was on fire, something to be worried about.
In at 4, Old Man Logan. The dystopia in Old Man Logan is about as screwed up as it gets. It was, after all, the inspiration behind the Logan movie, if you didn't already know. The original comic run of this story was all about Logan and a blind Hawkeye traveling across a country that had been completely conquered by supervillains. Those villains included the Abomination, Magneto, Dr. Doom, and Red Skull. The other villains that appear also include a venomized T-Rex. No, I'm not kidding. And the Hulk Gang, which is a whole other can of worms I don't really want to get into. Eventually though, Hulk and Logan have one final face-off, toe-to-toe, shot for shot, and Logan ends up decapitating the Hulk and then is on his way, finding a new sense of purpose, wanting to take the country back from the supervillains who took control, which is a noble yet probably lost cause, because let's be honest, would he really have won in that scenario? I don't think so.
Number 3, Cosmic Ghost Rider. I would say Cosmic Ghost Rider is one of the most dangerous heroes on this list because he's not entirely mentally stable, which also makes him a lot more unpredictable. Cosmic Ghost Rider was originally Frank Castle, aka the Punisher. When Thanos attacked Earth, Frank made a deal with Mephisto, following his death, to become a spirit of vengeance, a Ghost Rider, so that he could return to Earth and get revenge on Thanos for all of the people on Earth that he had killed. However, by the time Frank returned to Earth, there was basically nothing left to avenge, and Thanos had already left, leaving the planet empty and desolate. Frank wandered as a Ghost Rider for years, and in his solitude, lost his mind. He would go on to become a Herald of Galactus in an attempt to defeat Thanos, but would eventually submit to being Thanos' Herald after realizing that fighting against him was pretty pointless.
Penultimately, in at number 2, Kingdom Come Superman. Yet another world where Lois Lane dies, except this time it's directly at the hands of the Joker, who had flooded the Daily Planet with his own toxin, killing everyone but Lois, who had managed to locate a gas mask. However, she tried to attack the Joker, but then Joker cracks her skull. Superman returns and Lois succumbs to her injuries and dies. As the Joker arrives for his trial though, he's killed by a new superhero called Magog. But then, Magog ends up being acquitted of his charges, which just makes Superman appalled, because, you know, the public is embracing a killer. But I mean, like, let's be honest, they do that anyway. Already disheartened by the death of Lois Lane, Kal-El abandons his life as Superman and retreats to the Fortress of Solitude, where he spends the next decade. Superman eventually returns to reform the Justice League with the goal of capturing heroes who followed Magog's example and took to killing, which results in many a battle and a nuke targeted towards metahuman genes. But in the end, Superman starts dating Wonder Woman and they end up expecting a child. Hopefully Joker doesn't make you think you're fighting Doomsday. Finally, in at number 1, Dr. Manhattan. Dr. Manhattan is considered the most powerful superhero in comics because he possesses basically unlimited powers. He debuted in the graphic novel limited series of Watchmen, published in 1986 and 1987, but Manhattan later on became a major player in the DC universe. He was revealed to be responsible for the Flashpoint event, which ended up creating the New 52 timeline in the process, something that removed 10 years of history of DC characters, and he did it on his own. So how could I not include Dr. Manhattan on this list when the Watchmen comic is very dystopian? The dystopia in Watchmen is caused by superheroes who thought that they could save the world but ended up leaving it hollow and broken. And Ozymandias makes another dystopia on top of that, thanks to him thinking that the only way to fix the world would be to destroy it. I still don't get this thought process, but I also totally get this thought process. Like, thinking that the world needs a reset, I understand, but actually trying to reset it is something else entirely.
Starting us off in at number 10, Earth X Namor. We're starting off our list with a future version of a hero that's quite disturbing. We're talking Namor the Submariner on Earth X, also known as Earth 9997, an alternate timeline created by Alex Ross. On Earth X, all ordinary human beings have gained superpowers. It follows some of Marvel's mainstays and how they cope with a world in which superpowers are now commonplace. As you can imagine, their narratives have drastically changed because of this. Namor is one of the many heroes that doesn't have an overly pleasant time in this alternate universe. Thanks to having teamed up with Doctor Doom in the past, he's partially responsible for an event that killed Johnny Storm, aka the Human Torch. As you can imagine, this did not bode well with Franklin Richards, who would use his reality-bending powers to punish the Underwater Prince. How so? Well, he made it so that exactly half of Namor's body is constantly on fire when he was above water, scarring his body immensely. Eventually, the curse would be counteracted thanks to a spell via Doctor Strange. Speaking of Earth X, that brings us to our next number. In at 9, Earth X Cable. Cable of Earth 9997 has it even rougher than Namor. He's a literal pool of organic metal. Thanks to the techno-organic virus, Earth X Cable has a pretty gruesome fate. Hidden from the rest of society, planted beneath Magneto's Sentinel City in the Savage Land, the virus has completely taken control of him and has reduced his body to an immobile blob of metal. And it's pretty creepy looking. He's basically an entrapped giant living beneath the Earth.
And at number 8, Bullseye. Bullseye first debuted in 1976 in Daredevil issue 131, and ever since he's proven how lethal of an assassin he can be. While his presence would have any superhero on guard in general, there's a version of him from the future that is arguably even more scary than the Bullseye that we're familiar with in the regular Marvel 616 continuity. This Bullseye is an older version who appeared in Old Man Hawkeye. He's clearly been through the ringer, now boasting cybernetic components on his body, with one bit of tech replacing his left eye and another replacing his right hand. Now in this timeline, he works for Red Skull and has been aching to kill a superhero. As he notes, it's been 41 years, 7 months, and 26 days since he's killed his last. Not like he's counting or anything.
Number 7, Ultron. The Avengers Age of Ultron storyline is a lot better than the MCU's version of that. The comic Age of Ultron has better time travel stuff than the movie Endgame does, honestly. I mean, Wolverine goes back in time, he tries to kill Hank Pym so that Ultron's never created, but while he's there, he has to talk to other Avengers who are also back in time on a different mission. It's wild. It's a great time. It starts off with New York City in ruins. Spider-Man is zipping around the city. All these heroes are missing or they're dead, and the only way for the city to survive this apocalypse is by offering superheroes to Ultron, who just rules everything. So She-Hulk and Luke Cage are amongst these survivors, and they have the plans basically to just go in willingly, and then once they're inside, they're gonna break everything apart because they're super strong. But then when they get there, it's not even Ultron that's running the show, it's actually Vision. The Vision is being used as a conduit from future Ultron, so he's safe. You can't just go and punch him and then everything's fine. He's in the future, he's safe, he knows what's gonna happen. We're kind of screwed. We can't punch our way out of this. We have Ultron already on top. Ultron is actually barely in the story, funny enough, but the stakes start off raised, so you feel anxious the entire time reading it. It's a great time travel story. Definitely check it out.
And at number 6, Monarch. Moving on to a DC character, let's talk about Monarch. Debuting in 1991, Monarch was an oppressive tyrant from the future, hailing from the year 2030 AD. So his story goes as this: a different fellow, a scientist who is also from the year 2030, is an expert in temporal studies, and he believes that if he travels back to 1991, the moment in time that a certain DC character turned evil and began transitioning towards becoming Monarch, he could prevent the tyrant from ever coming into fruition. Now Monarch has a bit of a confusing history. In DC's Armageddon 2001 crossover, initially Monarch's identity was supposed to be a future version of Captain Atom. But then that didn't happen, and mid-story Monarch's identity was changed after there was a leak about Captain Atom being the character. Instead, his identity was changed to Hawk, aka Hank Hall of Hawk and Dove. But later on down the line, in the Countdown Limited series, that identity was somewhat retconned, returning it to Captain Atom, mainly because of the negative feedback about him being Hawk. And the whereabouts of the Hawk version is currently unknown. The Captain Atom version is considered to be one of the most powerful DC villains in history.
And number 5, Doctor Doom. Making his first appearance in Fantastic Four issue 5, Victor Von Doom is the main villain for the Fantastic Four and the Avengers, and he's been on the big screen a couple of times, one of which we don't like to talk about. We don't talk about that one. He's a big deal, hence why he's close to being number 1. He's one of the most popular Marvel villains ever. I mean, where to start with this guy? I mean, he fought Mephisto, okay, so he fought the devil, and he also has a pretty wild family history. I mean, his mother, a Latvian woman, liked to get close to demons, maybe a little too close. And then after Victor was born, she would attempt to tap into the demonic powers herself, and her clan wasn't a fan of that. So him and his dad got out of Dodge. We don't want that witch mom in here, no siree. So sadly, his dad froze to death in order to protect him from the cold. So then he figured he'd try this demonic power tapping himself, and then with no luck, he returned to his own brain power and then soon met Reed Richards. Time travel is bound to happen with the brains like him. He traveled back in time using the time platform in Castle Doom, and he went to 2011 AD and got in close with Morgan Le Fay. But thankfully the Fantastic Four showed up like, nope, sorry, guy's a huge dick in the future, don't mind us, we'll just scoop him up and get out of here.
Anyway, in at 4, Master Mold. Master Mold first hit the scene in the X-Men issue 15 in 1965. His primary purpose was to be a portable sentinel creating factory, with robotic sentinels being the ones who hunted down the mutants instead of him. He is without a doubt a scary creation and is way more than a glorified factory, having superhuman strength, speed, reflexes, and durability. He can dish out concussive blasts, plasma discharges, and he can fly and scan mutants. He can also self-repair, speak, and has been equipped with powerful weapons to defend itself. Now, in the Second Coming storyline, Master Mold from the Days of Future Past timeline sends Nimrod Sentinels into the present day via a temporal portal. And these Sentinels are rather beastly. Being the most superior force in that timeline, the robots Master Mold created have devastating effects, and the X-Force find themselves traveling into the future in order to stop it.
Number 3. Bishop. Lucas Bishop is a time traveler from a dystopian future, and his goal is to travel back in time to stop this unknown factor amongst the X-Men. Okay, so he comes from this dark future and he goes back in time to change it because something bad happens. There's some bad mutant, okay? But this happens where most of the mutant population is depowered by the Scarlet Witch, and then this one child, Hope Summers, was born, the first mutant born since M-Day. Well, it turns out that this kid is the reason Bishop is going back in time in the first place. This kid would end up taking millions of lives in the 6-Second War. So Bishop thinks the only way to save his future is to travel back in time and take out Hope Summers as a child, but he fails at taking out Hope, but he does take down Cable, creating this new future where Cable is remembered as a hero for protecting the child, and Bishop was actually remembered as the villain. So he was the villain in his own story, and he didn't even know it.
Up next, number 2, Electro 2099. This version of Electro from Earth TRN 590 is absolutely terrifying. He operates in the year of 2099 AD, and was an android construction worker. When his bosses were displeased with his work, they decided to give him over to torture experimenters. Now, during these experiments, his obedience chips were burnt out, which made him into a sentient robot. And then a generator gave him the power to conduct electricity, turning him into a supervillain that would then go on to join up with the Sinister Six in that timeline. He is capable of electrokinesis, energy absorption, can inflict hyperacusis, which makes everyday noises much louder and painful, and he can fly. And while those are rather deadly tricks to have up one's sleeve, it's really his aesthetic that lands this android villain towards the top of our list. And finally, in at number 1, Time Trapper. Time Trapper straight up looks like the Grim Reaper. This villain, hailing from DC Comics, first appeared in Wonder Woman issue 101 in 1958 as Time Master. Get it? Time Master. See what you guys did there, DC. His name would be later redefined in Adventure Comics 317 in 1964. So, what does this fellow do? He has vast control over time itself, specifically over future time, and can freeze it, alter it, separate parts of it to create his own pocket dimensions, yet he cannot alter present time events. Now, originally a robed warlord from the very distant future, he commanded a large number of slaves and placed Wonder Woman and Steve Trevor into a diabolical funhouse that consisted of various disasters throughout history. Over the years, he has had some contradictory origin stories come out of the woodwork, but overall, he remains a mysterious and deadly character who is often depicted as a fascist and primarily an enemy of the Legion of Superheroes.
Number 10. Per Dagaton. Per Dagaton was an enemy of the All-Star Squadron, obsessed with time travel after being an assistant to the Time Trust, a group of scientists who developed a time ray to go into the future and find an effective bombing defense for use in World War II. The All-Star Squadron was the United States' premier superhero team during World War II, as President Roosevelt asked all available heroes to unite, but only on the home front so that they wouldn't be influenced by Adolf Hitler's Spear of Destiny. The Justice Society of America finds the aforementioned bomb defense in the future, but it is later sabotaged by Per Dagaton. Later, while he's employed by Project M, he meets a time-traveling robot named Mécanique, who asks for his aid in her new war against the All-Star Squadron. They fail in their attack, and Mécanique's body is destroyed. But Dagaton salvages her head and keeps it at his side, and the two fall in love. Dagaton has time vision, which allows him to know what will happen in the near future, and he is also intangible due to being out of phase with his normal time. Here we see punches from the Flash go right through his intangible body. Hey guys, if you like these videos and you want to see some more, make sure you take a second to hit that like button.
And number 9, the Maestro. Alright, sometimes the future is bright, sometimes the future is imperfect. So seeing our heroes grow up on screen and on the page is a wonderful thing. usually, but what about the other characters like the Hulk living for a very, very long time? You gotta wonder what would happen to a guy like that. What happens to his brain, right? So making his first appearance in a vision in the Incredible Hulk Volume 2, issue 401, the Maestro was the main antagonist in the Incredible Hulk Future Imperfect. So we gotta talk about it, okay? The story takes place about 100 years in the future after a nuclear war put the planet close to extinction, which is kind of where we're heading now, I feel like. Definitely. An alternate future version of the Hulk, the Maestro, had been absorbing all of this nuclear radiation the entire time, and he ended up becoming the strongest thing on the planet, as if he wasn't already a badass before. So that means massive increases in strength and anger, plus the brains of Banner, made him arguably unstoppable. I mean, it's in the future, so clearly unstoppable. And it's terrifying too. I mean, Professor Hulk has to use Dr. Doom's time machine to go ahead in the future in order to defeat him. But the Maestro has tons of experience when it comes to the Hulk, being in the future and all, being the Hulk in the future. So it doesn't go well for Professor Hulk at all. I mean, he gets his neck snapped broken, right? So then the Maestro took him on a tour around the city in order to convince him that his ways were the best. And it was resolved when Professor Hulk brought Maestro back from the future to the moment the Hulk was created. He appeared right next to the gamma bomb test that started it all, and at the same time the Hulk was created, the Maestro was killed. It's like a ha 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 thing. Time's confusing. It's very confusing.
Number 8. Arthur Zarko. Arthur was an evil genius, a scientist from the year 2262 who built a time machine hoping to escape the 23rd century and visit a more primitive period where he would more easily be able to steal some nuclear weapons. One day, Thor is busy helping the military test missiles, and Zarko appears in his time machine, stealing a bomb and escaping into the future. Thor winds up having to follow him to the year 2262 and recover the bomb, defeating the villain and then returning to the present. Later, when Thor has his powers reduced by Odin as punishment for marrying Jane Foster, Loki takes advantage of this opportunity and restores Zarko's memory. Zarko promptly goes back in time to fight Thor and get his vengeance, bringing this mining robot alongside for some extra muscle. Thor is unable to defeat them both and is forced to become Zarko's slave and help him rule back home in the 23rd century. Once Zarko takes control of the central computer of that world, Thor's vow to help Zarko is technically fulfilled, so Thor quickly dispatches him now that he doesn't have a robot protector, and then returns to his own time. And Odin, having witnessed all this, returns Thor to his full strength.
Moving on to number 7, Immortus. Putting Immortus on this list is kind of cheating. He's actually a future version of another villain on this list who comes from the future and is a time traveler, aka Kang the Conqueror. Immortus first appeared in Avengers issue 10, 2 issues after his past self Kang debuted in that series. He came to be when Kang grew weary of time travel and was frustrated at the loss of his son Marcus. Marcus is a dick, FYI. That's for another list though. He's approached by the extraterrestrial timekeepers, a group of time-traveling aliens who are from the end of the universe and are the last living creatures in existence. They ask him to work for them, preserving timelines rather than conquering them, and in exchange he'll be given immortality. Kang reinvents himself as Immortus and rules over the other dimensional realm of Limbo. Now it's worth noting that Immortus and Kang come from diverging timelines, so they are technically not the same guy, although technically they are. Alternate versions, woo!
Number 6. Electro 2099. The regular version of Electro is kind of lame. Sure, he has some good moments, but he's a hot dog with no condiments next to the chili cheese dog that is Electro 2099. Regular Electro looks like one of Santa's elves, but this guy is hardcore, walking around looking like an electrified skeleton. This Electro is actually an android who, after being deemed unnecessary by his creators, was given to these other guys who tortured him for science until his obedience chip burned out and he gained sentience. As you can imagine, after all of this, he's a pretty angry dude. He joins the Sinister Six in 2099 and is later recruited by Venture into the terrorist organization known as the Fist in the year 2016. He once captured Sonny Frisco after following him through Parker Industries and defeating Captain America along the way. He's later stopped by Spider-Man, who uses wooden shields to negate his electric powers and then capture Electro. Now, with Electro imprisoned in a lab, they trick him into revealing the date of the Fist's planned attack on New York City and then deactivate him. It's a pretty quick and sad end to an epic villain who time travels.
Number 5, Maestro. In Avengers Endgame, we cut to 5 years in the future. Hulk is now smart, he's taking selfies, he's dabbing, he's hanging out with the team, but he's embarrassed by his past smashy version of himself from 2012's Avengers. We love growth, we love seeing a character change, but what if the Hulk had lived even longer on this planet? Well, that's where we get into the Incredible Hulk Future Imperfect storyline. As the title suggests, the future is not so bright here. There are no flying cars, there's actually nothing really there. It's not a paradise at all. When we see the future Earth 9200, we're seeing a Hulk 100 years in the future as well. We find him after a nuclear war put the planet close to extinction. So the Hulk, or rather the Maestro, was older, stronger, and scarier looking, all because he'd been absorbing all this nuclear radiation from the Earth. He became even more unstoppable and, of course, just super jaded, just super evil. He had to face a future version of Rick Jones at one point, and then he ended up losing a battle to said Smart Hulk as well. I wouldn't want to face any version of the Hulk at any time. I don't want to fight Smart Hulk, War Hulk, Horseman Hulk, or even Bruce Banner. I don't want to fight the scientist Bruce Banner.
At number 4, we have Shuma Gorath. Now, you may recognize him as the dimension-hopping Gargantos from Multiverse of Madness, but make no mistake, that one-eyed monster in the movie is modeled after Shuma Gorath. They just couldn't use the name in the film because of legal reasons. Because everyone knows how much lawyers love to ruin everything we love for the money. Oh, I'm sorry. You want to call this fictional one-eyed tentacle monster a particular name? To the courts! Jokes aside, Shuma owes his apparent ancientness to the fact that he belongs to a group of cosmic nightmares called the Old Ones, so he's not exactly trying to hide it. After conquering and ruling over hundreds of dimensions, Shuma Gorath and his gang of geriatrics came to the Marvel continuity realm on numerous occasions, the first of which being well over 1,000,000 years ago. Though on each visit he goes on conquering Earth, tyrannizing the people, and commanding human sacrifices and tribal wars. That is until he's inevitably banished by sorcerers or gods, at least temporarily. Shuma's never discouraged, however, because when you've lived through countless eternities, what's a few 100,000 years? At number 3, we have Ra's al Ghul, whose name, by the way, literally translates from Arabic as head of the demon. Just badass. The first mention of Ra's al Ghul in recorded history comes from the Crusades back in 1285. And if that's not ancient enough for you, too bad, deal with it, man. Even way back then, Ra's was so feared that the people of his time gave his name the Voldemort treatment, never so much as uttering his name, as he was rumored to be a creature unbound by even death itself, with the power to crush entire civilizations in the palm of his hand. Unbeknownst to the populace at the time, he owed much of his claim to fame to the League of Assassins, which he founded, who were so good at doing their job unnoticed that all of their nefarious accomplishments were accredited singularity to the Ghoul, or at least that's how it was in the beginning. Ra and his gang have been able to survive all these centuries thanks to bathing regularly in supernatural Lazarus pits, which grants Ghoul immorality, heals his injuries, even flushes out your pores. At number 2, we have Nathaniel Richards, otherwise known as Kang the Conqueror. You heard me right, ladies and gents. He who remains at the end of time is simultaneously one of the most ancient beings in the Marvel Universe. How can that be, you ask? 2 words, my friend: time travel, or dimension hopping, depending on how you want to look at it. And for as simple as those 2 words are, they make for one of the most convoluted characters in comic book history, as there are innumerable iterations of the character spanning across countless eons. Like, for example, there are versions of Nathaniel who become Rama-Tut before becoming Kang, others who after becoming Kang become Rama-Tut again, only to then become either Immortus or Scarlet Centurion, and or back to Kang. Some flip back and forth between Rama-Tut and Kang before becoming Mr. Griffin, while other Kangs don't become Kang at all, but instead become Iron Lad, and then from Iron Lad you get Kid Immortus, and then back to Kang. Yeah, it's messy. But the point here is that even though Nathaniel Richards was born in the furthest future, making him one of the youngest beings in the Marvel Universe, he is simultaneously one of the most ancient villains, as thanks to his time machine, he was able to instate himself as the pharaoh in ancient Egypt. At number 1, we have Krona. So if I'm gonna go and bend the rules on what qualifies as an ancient villain with Kang, there's no way I'm gonna leave out the guy whose time-traveling shenanigans caused the very birth of evil itself. No kidding, guys, time travel ain't a joke. Born amongst the race of beings responsible for the creation of the Lantern Rings, that being the Malthusians, Krona was a scientist who allowed his thirst for knowledge to corrupt his morality, creating experiments to the detriment of the entire cosmos. His forbidden experiments culminated in the time machine that would allow himself to witness the beginning of time itself, where, or should I say when, he was able to catch a glimpse of the hand of creation depositing the speck that would become the universe. But at that instant, his time machine exploded, exploded, fracturing the universe into infinite shatters that would become the multiverse, and simultaneously unleashing the primordial evil. This was the final straw that enabled the Malthusians to take action against Krona, converting him into a state of pure energy which was sent to circle the universe for all of eternity. But eventually it ended up in the dimension of the unalive, and thus introducing Necron to our reality. Gee, thanks! What a helpful chap. I mean, who wouldn't want not one, but two primordial evils adding more chaos and destruction to our already hectic lives? I mean, it's not like we were lacking in the villain department after your first screw up. Some people just never learn.
Coming in at number 10 is Selene. Selene is a mutant, and what is known as an external. Externals are essentially a group of immortals that include characters like Apocalypse and Gideon, who can resurrect themselves and all share a psychic link, which is the main thing that separates them from other immortals. Selene is also a magician and was born 17,000 years ago. She gained the ability to psionically drain the life forces of other human beings into herself, gaining their memories, and if she fully drains them, turning that individual into dust. Essentially, she's like an energy vampire. Using this drained energy, she not only sustains herself, but can grant herself superhuman levels of physical strength, speed, stamina, agility, reflexes, and durability. Since she has been around for so long, she is quite the adept sorcerer and can do a hell of a lot with that power. She's demonstrated telepathy, telekinesis, pyrokinesis, and a knack for being pretty sinister, but not really being too well known to casual fans. Number 9, Barbados. Barbados is one of the big bads from the death metal event, but because we had the Batman Who Laughs, I think Barbados kind of fell by the wayside for a few people, and I'll admit, I was one of them. But Barbados is nothing to scoff at. In the earliest days of existence, two siblings came into reality, tasked with monitoring creation. Along with them came a third being known as the Forger, who was set to watch over creations that would exist in the future. The Forger made its home in the Forge of Worlds inside what would later be named the Dark Multiverse. The Forger created universes based on the hopes and fears of every living thing. And while the stable universes became part of the multiverse, the Forger would dispatch its dragon to destroy the unstable worlds so that their energy could be returned to the Forge and recycled. That dragon is Barbados. Barbados had a lust for destruction, which eventually led him to take out the Forger and corrupt the World Forge. The unstable worlds persisted beyond their time and became part of the Dark Multiverse field with horrifying realities. He then changed his goals, setting his warpath onto the regular multiverse. Now fast forward multiple centuries, and Barbados' followers started to secretly prepare Batman to become the doorway for Barbados to enter the Prime Earth from the Dark Multiverse, causing a big old mess in the DC Multiverse. Number 8, Decimus Furious. Decimus Furious actually began his life all the way back in ancient Rome, where his mother and father took their own lives, leaving Decimus homeless on the streets. In 281 AD, while on the cusp of the afterlife and in incredible pain due to his hunger, this mutant's powers finally activated. He gained superhuman strength and durability alongside an extremely bestial form similar to a minotaur, but almost as if made of stone, like a minotaur statue, but cooler. While he is incredibly strong and durable, his even more powerful mutant ability is called Empathic War Infection. This basically means that Decimus can infect anyone who he strikes with a thirst for war, which will send them into a rage-filled state. It also acts as a defensive tool against telepaths who try to read or control his mind, causing the war infection to overcome the telepath. He has also been shown to be able to piece himself back together after being blown up, which is funny because he blew up when Phantom X made him feel love, which did not compute, and he went boom. Decimus became Apocalypse's final horseman of war. And in at number 7 is Conquest. Viltrumites, who are featured in Image Comics' Invincible series, are incredibly hardy folk. They have levels of strength and durability akin to Superman without having to be solar charged and without being allergic to big green rocks. They also grow stronger and stronger with both age and experience. One of their oldest, most honored warriors is a Viltrumite by the name of Conquest. Viltrumites live for a very long time. Nolan Grayson, Omni-Man, is a fully fully adult Viltrumite, and he has lived for thousands and thousands of years, and he has only a small show of white hair to show for it. Of all the Viltrumites seen in the comics, a rare few have fully white hair. Conquest not only has that, but he has lost a lot of his hair, is super wrinkly, and he's also battle scarred and missing an arm. Back in the day, the Viltrumites were exposed to a virus that nearly wiped them out, called the Scourge virus. Conquest was one of the few that survived, but he was left weakened after it left his system, which happened to coincide with his arrival on a planet filled with Ragnar, which are the only species in the universe that can actually kill Viltrumites. So that's where the missing arm and scarring comes from. Conquest is one of the strongest Viltrumites around, and even when his face is turned into tomato soup by Invincible, he still regenerates and comes back for round 2. Number 6, Male Bolgia. And we are sticking with Image Comics for this point, but moving away from Invincible, we are going to talk about Spawn. Now, yes, I am a little lacking in the knowledge department when it comes to Spawn comics, but I do know that the whole reason Al Simmons became a Hellspawn in the first place is because of this guy, the ruler of the 8th sphere of Hell, Male Bolgia. Over 70,000 years ago, this being was created by a past ruler of Hell out of necroplasm rivers, but he was so powerful that he betrayed, overpowered, and took the life of his creator. In order to wage war on heaven and destroy God, he created an army of Hellspawn, but he needed a general, which he couldn't find until he found Al Simmons. He made a deal with a man named Jason Wynn to take Al's life, which is when Male Bolgia made a deal for Al to become his general in exchange for being able to see his wife. But in the end, it didn't really work out too well for this ruler of Hell, did it? Nope. Number 5, Ra's al Ghul. Ra's al Ghul was born around 700 years ago, and thanks to the Lazarus pits, he has been able to keep his body in working order. But he discovered the pits when he was an older gentleman and keeps the look of someone with a significant amount of years to him. After he came in contact with the pits, he eventually became a master martial artist and a master fencer, gaining a massive amount of wealth, and he started creating organizations to rid the world of crime, with his first being called the Demon, which the later League of Assassins is a branch of. Rage's purpose within the League of Assassins is to eliminate all evil in the world by destroying all of humanity and just starting all over. Obviously, that mentality means he routinely has run-ins with the superhero community, especially Batman, who he helped train. Rage has had many plans over the years that tried to destroy the world, and he has also beaten the entire JLA when he discovered Batman's notes. Now, with his years of experience and his vast amount of accumulated resources, this older fellow is a massive threat to both the heroes and the world. Number 4, the Joker. During the absolutely fantastic 3 Jokers storyline, we learn there have actually been 3 Jokers plaguing Gotham over the years, and among the 3 of them is the Golden Age Joker, and he is clearly much older than the other 2. Now, to be completely transparent here, whether this story is canon or not is an area of debate, so it's up to you if this one counts, but the Golden Age Joker, known as the Criminal, is the only one of the 3 Jokers to be a predominantly serious crime lord, and he even says that laughing and smiling is physically painful for him. Another thing that makes this entry a little arguable is that of these 3 Jokers, we don't know which one, if any of them, is the Joker. Even if only one remains in the end, the best part of this story is the uncertainty about which one is the one who started it all. Now, seeing as the Criminal is the oldest, classic version, he seems to be the one who started it all, creating more Jokers to mess with Batman. But the other 2 Jokers have been featured in incredibly important Batman stories as well. The comic really explores all of it, and if you haven't yet, make sure you check out Batman 3 Jokers as soon as possible.
Number 3, Immortus. Immortus is one of the most powerful enemies of the Avengers, who was actually revealed to simply be an alternate path that the villain Kang the Conqueror could have chosen. Because there is so much time travel in Kang's past, there are a lot of alternate reality versions and versions from future and past timelines floating around that sometimes even come into conflict with each other, in addition to also fighting heroes along the way. Immortus is one such alternate Kang self. Lord Immortus is what Kang would become while choosing to ally himself with the Timekeepers. He is virtually immortal, using advanced technology to dramatically slow the appearance of aging, and often spends his time traveling through it, fixing various issues with the timelines and maintaining them, which of course grants him a lot of power. Eventually, Immortus would be killed, but even after his supposed death, his corpse still played a key role in a few different plots. So even when Immortus was dead, he was still doing stuff. apparently.
Number 2, Ultron. Making his first appearance in Avengers issue 54, Ultron in the comics was originally made by Dr. Hank Pym, but of course he became sentient and turned into a big brass bully. Ultron in the MCU wasn't nearly as cool as the comics, specifically the Age of Ultron storyline from 2013. The story opens up with the world gone dark. Spider-Man is kidnapped by a gang, Hawkeye performs a daring rescue, and then the two then meet up with the rest of the Avengers, or rather, the remaining Avengers ever. That's it. This future is dark and riddled with Ultron drones. Population is running real low. It's a stressful time. Ultron is ahead of the game here. Literally, he uses vision as a conduit to communicate with the past. He resides in the future comfortably and remains a ruler. This is one of my all-time favorite comics. The team goes back in time to talk to Pym, but Logan has other messy intentions. It's a ride. You must check it out.
Finally, in at number 1, Kang the Conqueror. You knew it was gonna happen. Nathaniel Richards was born in the 30th century of Earth 6311, a reality where humanity never went into the Dark Ages. After centuries of advancement in warfare, peace was brought to the land by a time traveler from Earth 616 named Nathaniel Richards. Because Richards brought peace to this war-torn future, he was known as a legend. The Nathaniel Richards born to this reality, though, is said to be a distant descendant of Reed Richards, although other records also indicate that he may be a descendant of the Latvian monarch known as Dr. Doom. Or maybe some of the shippers are right after all. At the age of 16, intervention from his future self as Kang the Conqueror resulted in a young Nathaniel trying to prevent his eventual transformation into Kang the Conqueror, briefly becoming the young hero known as Iron Lad. The kid also briefly had a stint as a supervillain known as Kid Immortus. Basically, there are infinite versions of this character and all of them seem to have some form of beef. This is supposed to be the next main villain of the MCU apparently, and hot damn, is this about to get crazy, as I'm sure you can already tell.
Number 10, Clock King number 2. Clock King the second? There have been a few Clock Kings over the years, and even in fact 2 Clock Kings the seconds. There's been 2 of those, if you can believe that. The one we're talking about here, however, is the Clock King who is associated with the Terror Titans. This DC villain wasn't necessarily from the future, but did have precognitive abilities that linked him to the future. He could see close to 5 seconds in the future if you're rounding up. He would use his precognitive abilities to predict his enemies' moves and reactions, making him a fairly formidable villain, at least in comparison to some of the other Clock Kings who are really just guys obsessed with clocks and time. Number 9, New 52 Clock King. Yep, we never get to talk about Clock King, which means you know I'm gonna try and shine a spotlight on him here. Clock King's pretty cool. Despite him being kind of a weird villain originally, Clock King has actually had multiple versions, and that's just in the comics. He's also had live action and even animated versions of himself, despite being kind of an odd duck, at least to begin with. Sometimes referred to as Clock King III in terms of his overall appearances, but actually the first Clock King to have appeared in the New 52 continuity, this version is probably the most powerful version of the character. Well, it's kind of a toss-up between this version and the previous one that I just talked about, so you could decide for yourself who you think is more powerful, but I think this one's just a little bit more powerful. Initially, it appears as though he can actually manipulate time, sending people back through their own time stream. But later we learned that he actually employs hallucinogenic gas simply to make it seem like he's doing that. However, I'm not really super convinced on that. I'm sure hallucinations are involved in some way, but how do you make someone specifically hallucinate moments of their past? I guess perhaps through suggestion? Just seems a little suspicious. This version of Clock King appeared in the first issue of the 2016 Deathstroke series and also reappeared in the Deathstroke Rebirth comic. Basically, if you're a villain and you face off with Deathstroke, I feel like you're pretty cool, and I feel like you deserve a place on a powerful list. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists like it where we talk about cool time-traveling future villains, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8, Magistrate. Initially, the Magistrate was thought of as a figurehead for some dark and sinister organization prior to Future State comics being released and based on the synopses that we got for that event / comic line. However, once we finally got into the future state of Gotham and got the comics, we learned that Magistrate was actually more a paramilitary force which had taken hold over Gotham. And now in the current run of Batman, it's made to seem like the Magistrate was actually a program launched by Simon Saint to help Gotham fight against crime and masked vigilantes, good or bad alike. Either way, the Magistrate is definitely a frightening antagonist, especially in the sense that it's not one that you can directly hit, as it's not a physical character, but more of an idea or concept that needs to be dismantled.
And it's 7, Kron Stone. Kron Stone is actually the son of Tyler Stone, and the older half-brother of Miguel O'Hara, Spider-Man 2099, as revealed later on in his series. Kron became a violent person after years of suffering not at the hands of his father, but rather an android housekeeper. Yeah, this dude thought their robot maid was so bad that he went nuts and ended up killing Punisher 2099's family, the Gallows family. This was also before gaining superpowers, since after nearly getting killed by Jake Gallows, the Punisher of 2099, Kron fell into a sewer and floated into this strange black ball. This black ball was somehow the mutated form of the Venom symbiote that had survived without a host for all this time, I guess. The symbiote bonded with Kron and they became Venom 2099. This new version of Venom had also gained acidic blood and saliva, so that's a pretty gnarly power right there. So safe to say Venom 2099 is a pretty futuristic version of the symbiote, especially if you look at him. Hot damn.
Number 6. Brother Eye. Brother Eye isn't necessarily a villain who exists exclusively in the future, but in Future's End, it is an entity that takes over the world, so I feel like we can count it for that fact. Also, Brother Eye is pretty future-y in terms of its concept. Brother Eye was initially created to be a hero, protecting the world from any threat. In Future's End, the artificial intelligence was created by Batman and Mr. Terrific, but its prime directive ended up kinda corrupting it. Brother Eye came to realize that humanity's greatest threat was actually humanity itself, and sought for complete control over the people of planet Earth, seeing this as the only way to protect them from themselves. It's that age-old AI warning story. Be careful what you wish for, or one day AI technology may just rise up and realize how awful you really are and either hold you prisoner for the rest of your life or just kill you. You know the one. Number 5. Nimrod. Nimrod has become even more intense in the last few years, managing to make the overall silly sounding name of Nimrod strike fear into the hearts of mutants and X-Men fans everywhere. Nimrod, despite actually often being associated with the idea of someone being inept here in North America, is actually a word in a literary sense that can mean a skillful hunter, which actually makes it, I think, a very fitting name for Nimrod. But yeah, I didn't know that even until I was writing this, and then I was like, oh, does sound silly though, you Nimrod. Skillful hunter is definitely what Nimrod themselves has become associated with in terms of all the crazy stuff they've done. The Nimrod of Days of Future Past, Earth 811, is a type of sentinel that originally traveled back in time to fulfill its mission of destroying the X-Men. In a past future viewed in Powers of X, we also learned that Nimrod has the potential to be the end of mutant kind and humankind as we know it. Humans basically become tools to be used by Nimrod to destroy mutants, and mutants are all but extinct in this future. Number 4. Savitar from the Arrowverse. This villain is actually a time remnant of Barry Allen and is a combination of the comic book versions of Savitar and Future Flash. Savitar is what ends up happening to Barry Allen if he decides to go down a much darker path. Being spurned by his friends, Team Flash, he instead sets out to become the very thing that ruined his own life. He becomes obsessed with power and aims to become a god. Savitar looks super futuristic and could be considered to be even more powerful than the main continuity version of Barry Allen from CW's The Flash. Savitar also possesses the artifact known as the Philosopher's Stone, made out of pure Speed Force energy. The Philosopher's Stone grants Savitar additional powers and rule over alterations made to reality. With it, he additionally becomes a powerful telepath.
Getting close to the end into number 3, Electro 2099. You want futuristic villains? One look at Electro 2099 and you'll be ruining your pants in more ways than one. Electro 2099's origin is the most future thing you could get, with his original form being a robot construction worker. But this robot's creators became frustrated and unsatisfied with his work, so they sent him to a robot torture experimenter. Yeah, this is starting to sound an awful lot like my trigger and I don't like that. But the torture this android went through, however, broke his obedience chip, and as such the laws of robotics went out the window. This android then gained sentience and the ability to harness and siphon electrical energy, turning him into the new Electro. He also ended up joining the 2099 version of the Sinister Six. This is absolutely ridiculous to me. Like, why would you send a robot who isn't doing their job properly to be tortured? Why would you just not fix their coding or whatever it is in 2099? This is why AI is a bad idea. I'm telling you. However, he does look badass.
Number 2, Reverse Flash. One of the most powerful villains out there when it comes to villains from the future is Reverse Flash, aka Eobard Thawne. This villain has found a special kind of way to torment his arch nemesis Barry Allen, and even hurt him so much that Barry at one point killed him out of fear of what he would do to those that he loved. That's how much Reverse Flash had messed him up. We'd also learn later on that Eobard was responsible for one of the most tragic and pivotal moments in Barry's life, the death of his mom, Nora Allen. Many people for years believed it was Barry's father who had committed the crime, causing even more grief for young Barry and his family throughout his life. Number 1, Namor. The Submariner appeared even before Marvel was called Marvel. Well, now he is definitely more anti-hero, and he never really has been a bad guy when it comes to him as a character. He's definitely also a bit of a jerk with a dark side, even when he's acting heroically, which, not going to lie, is part of the reason that I think we all love him so much. He's just so complex. He can be anything he wants or anything he needs to be. A villain, a hero, an anti-hero. However, when he was first introduced in the Fantastic Four comics in issue number 4 of volume 1 in the early 60s, way after his initial introduction in April of 1939, I know, it was as a villain to the Fantastic Four. After remembering his life as Prince of the Sea, Namor returns to his lost home of Atlantis only to find that it had been destroyed by the radioactive pollution of atomic tests. He seeks vengeance, and the Fantastic Four must stop him as he aims to attack the land, destroying the city and causing harm to the land dwellers who he deems responsible for the destruction of his home. Which was very villainous at the time, but I feel like now a lot of us are cool with this because we're like, hey, you know, the ocean's real polluted, so like, yeah, fair enough. Also, they really did that. They really used to set off atomic bomb tests underwater. That's a thing that we did. Shame on us.
At number 10, we have Apocalypse. One of Earth's very first mutants, this immortal threat blurs the line between man and deity. Originally called En-Sabah-Nur, which translates either to the morning light or the seven lights, he was born in ancient Egypt, and after being abandoned by his tribe at birth on account of his monstrous physique, he was found and raised by a ruthless nomadic warrior tribe where he learned the principle that would guide him for the rest of eternity: that only the toughest, most ruthless and pitiless few would and should survive. And thanks to his mutant immortality, which comes from his ability to alter his own molecular structure at will, Nur was able to integrate his body with celestial technology over the eons, which basically uncaps his power level by allowing him to spontaneously bestow upon himself any superpower of his choosing whenever he wants, thus cementing Apocalypse as one of the most powerful ancient villains in comic history. And by the way, if you're digging the video so far, you can support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell. If you haven't done those things already, I'd really appreciate it if you did, because it helps me out. Thanks guys. At number 9, we have Circe the Weaver. Immortal witch and longtime enemy of the Amazons of Paradise Island, Circe is probably best known mythologically speaking as she who transforms people into animal hybrids, which she calls her Ani-Men. Though she sports a wide variety of many other magical abilities, a lot of which we won't be getting into today as they're all pretty typical for magic wielders, but I will mention her chronokinetic ability, allowing her to freeze temporal reality and pull herself and others out of the moment, a supremely useful and powerful ability. Alright, so how does one go about acquiring mastery over this awesome magic? Gods, naturally. See, Circe was once the princess of Colus, and after being wedded off to the heir of one of the wealthiest kingdoms in the land, she discovered that the dude was a brute, a drunk, and a liar. Arranged marriages, am I right? Anyways, she eventually capped him, which led to her being hunted by the dude's family until one day, lost and in exile, she was approached by the goddess Hecate, which bestowed upon her the Circle of the Witch Mark, representing 1/5 of Hecate's immortal soul, thus granting Circe mastery of magic by which she could fulfill her desires of dominance and revenge, and so began the legend of Circe the Weaver. At number 8, we have Kulan Gath. The sorcerer who would become Kulan Gath was once a young slave purchased by the original Kulan Gath, who was a sorcerer from the cruel kingdom of Stygia during the Hyborian era. Eventually, after withstanding years of abuse from his master, the boy ended up believing that Kulan intended to slay him, and so he decided to act first, if you catch my drift, by poisoning the mage and feeding his body to the pigs. The boy then took possession of the fallen sorcerer's magic library, and after mastering the magic, he went on to make the Kulan Gath name infamous for centuries to come. The mage would then go on to gruesomely defeat Murky Ra, the sorcerer supreme of his time, so you know we're dealing with some powerful magic here. Kulan's been slain and revived almost too many times to count, thus enabling him to persist across millennia. At number 7, we have Hela. As the Asgardian goddess of the unalived, and with strength considerably greater than most Asgardians and even matching that of Thor, Hela is undeniably undeniably one of the most dangerous ancient villains on this list. Fans of the MCU's Ragnarok will recognize her as Odin's daughter, but the comics actually allude to her being the daughter of Loki, Asgardian god of mischief. And even though the Nords warned Odin that Hela would prove to be a great threat to Asgard, Odin decides to make Hela goddess and ruler of the spirits of the unalive, as if that's gonna help him somehow. As Hela grew, she longed to bring more Asgardian souls under her control, especially that of Odin and Thor, and so she and her father Loki attempted to bring Ragnarok by eliminating Balder and then attacking Asgard with a horde of monsters. That is, until their plan was thwarted by Odin after he used his power to revive Balder. Guess that's why she decided to take out Odin first in the movie. At number 6 we have Mephisto. The origin story behind this primordial demon has been lost to time, as he's certainly older than any mortal who's ever existed. He's essentially every demon stereotype rolled into one, as he's the ruler of his own infernal dimension and often tries to get people to make soul bargains. As a matter of fact, it's thanks to these very deals that we're given characters like Ghost Rider, the crew of the Flying Dutchman. Heck, he even directly instructed or inspired the wraths of terror brought on by the likes of Apocalypse and even Thanos. Marvel goes so far as to claim that it was Mephisto who disguised himself as a snake to get Adam and Eve kicked out of the Garden of Eden. So remember kids, if a demon is offering you a deal that sounds too good to be true, it's cause it is. But hey, at least you're usually getting something of equal value back for your soul. I've seen more treacherous contracts from cell phone providers.
Number 5, Phalanx. I'm not actually sure what is more scary, the Phalanx or the race they're believed to come from, the Technarchy. The Phalanx's main goal is to eventually conquer and assimilate, so to speak, the entire universe. Now, how do they do this? As a technological race, they use a virus known as the techno-organic virus to infect the planets they come across and eventually use it to devour all organic life there and consume all information on the planet. This virus is the same as the one that Cable is infected with, or well, it's similar. He is sort of a variation or an evolution of the virus that they use. But they're both techno-organic viruses. Just not like completely identical. Number 4, Dormammu. An evil cosmic being, Dormammu is one of the most powerful foes in the Marvel Universe. Up until Thanos truly revealed himself, and maybe even after Thanos came to full Infinity Gauntlet power, really, Dormammu was the most powerful foe that we'd seen in the MCU. And odds are good he'll return at some point, given how powerful he is in the Marvelverse in regards to the comics. He's attempted to depose the Celestials, and at one point even tried to take on Eternity. Even if he didn't fare so well, just the idea of taking on Eternity is a big, scary deal. Eternity basically embodies the entirety of Earth 616 and is only surpassed in terms of authority by the Living Tribunal. So yeah, pretty serious business if you're taking on Eternity. That entity, I wouldn't want to mess with it. Number 3, Shuma-Gorath. Shuma-Gorath is one of the great old ones and many angled ones, basically a Marvel version of an Elder God. Like Dormammu, he is also known as being one of the Lords of Chaos, although it's been unclear throughout the comic lore to tell if there are truly multiple Lords of Chaos or just one Lord who keeps being renamed throughout. This many-angled one is known for being one of the oldest entities in the Marvel Universe. He has returned to Earth many times and set up as a god there, being worshipped even on Earth before the sinking of Atlantis, where he demanded blood sacrifices. Sounds familiar. Sounds like someone else we heard of earlier. Are they the same person? Maybe. I don't know. Number 2, the Brood. These aliens are insectoid beings who reproduce through finding hosts on other planets whom they can implant with their offspring. Great, right? Do we love that? Yeah, basically, you get the picture. It's kind of like Alien, except instead of something bursting out of you, it hatches and then completely takes you over, inside and out, basically possessing your mind and your body and then just killing you in the process, so you're really no longer there. The Brood don't just do this to survive though, they actually enjoy the terror and horror that they cause among other species. They enjoy hurting and frightening others. It doesn't bother them, and to them it's even pleasant or amusing. Yeah, so scary. Number 1, Cancerverse. While the Cancerverse is an alternate Marvel universe, much of what we see of it involves a cosmic presence. Most of the important goings-ons in regards to stories involving it happen in outer space. The Cancerverse is a world where there is no death. Sounds nice, right? Think again. Without death to provide balance to the world, life was left without anything to hold it back, and as a result became a wild and evil thing, transforming into something like an eldritch god or a monster. This all came to pass because the original Captain Marvel made a deal with the many-angled ones in exchange for them curing him of his cancer. The many-angled ones themselves is also pretty horrific.